All right, welcome to this week's episode of the feature-length podcast with only two hosts today. One of them is me. I'm Karolina, and the other one is...
Hi, it's me. It's Marco. I'm the other host.
You are not matching my energy level here.
Yeah.
It is like 6:30 p.m. on a Monday. I don't know what I was expecting. But, yeah, we are a podcast.
We'll ramp up.
We will.
Things will get intense.
The coffee will kick in. We'll start talking about Aaron Sorkin for some reason. You'll go wild.
Yeah, it'll be good.
But we're a podcast that normally talks about movies and TV shows for the length of a feature-length film, and that's why we have the title. And Dan's not here because he's busy and is none of your business. So you're just going to listen to us talk about this fantastic show called Gilmore Girls.
Woo!
Yeah, it's super exciting. In case someone somehow has never heard of it and doesn't know what it's about, I don't know how that would possibly happen. But it doesn't really have a plot, to be honest. It's just about a single mother who had a kid at like 16. And it's just like the life of her and her daughter in this tiny town of Stars Hollow and interacting with their super rich grandparents and the characters of the town. That's kind of all there is to it. There's, the usual romance and heartbreak and car crashes and inn fires and boat stealing and everything else you can come to expect in a tiny town.
Yeah.
Yeah. So since I introed it, Marco, how about you tell us your history with this beloved show?
I have an interesting history with the show. This, for a very long time, was my vacation show. And what I mean by that is whenever we would take road trips, so pretty much once a summer, my family would go on a road trip somewhere in Canada, because we are Canadian, if anyone didn't know that. So we would go, and it would be one of those shows where if my sister and I were sharing a room and it was late at night and we just wanted to watch something but couldn't sleep, it was kind of the perfect show because I could get into it, but she could get into it, and it was like perfect for everyone's age level. Yeah, and that was literally it. And so I had just seen random episodes of the show, and every time I saw an episode, I was like, that was good. Or at least most of the time.
Yeah.
Which we'll get into, definitely. But most of the time I saw an episode, I was like, that was cool. I should watch this show one day. And then, not to bury the lead here about what I'm going to end up ranting about later, but long story short, I discovered that there is for some reason, connection between fans of the show and fans of someone else's work, which we'll talk about later, whose work I enjoy.
You'll never guess.
Yeah, you'll never guess. I've not mentioned him a lot in this podcast. But I probably figured that out like first year university, which is now like 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, well, I've always said I would watch this show, so maybe now is the time to watch it. And I watched all of it. And that was right around the time the revival came out too, so I was able to watch the revival right after. And then, and I have rewatched certain episodes since, and I'm currently in the process of doing another full show rewatch right now. So that's kind of my history with the Gilmore Girls. How about you?
Yeah, I just kind of always saw it on TV, like random episodes, 'cause it's been in syndication forever. And so it was never something that I like sat down and watched when it was on TV. It was just like in the background, I guess, like kind of similar. It was a good show to like, if you paid attention, you liked it. If you didn't, it wasn't the end of the world. Like, it wasn't that engaging.
Yeah.
And then in university, just got hard into Netflix and binge watching every show possible. And so Gilmore Girls was on Netflix, and I was like, I've heard it's fine, and why not? I've seen some episodes, and then I started watching it, and at the same time, my friend Emily was like, have you heard of this podcast called Gilmore Guys? Because she knew I was watching it. And so I started listening to the podcast and watching the show simultaneously. I wasn't I watched an episode and listened to an episode because I couldn't be bothered. But I fell in love with the podcast, and that made me love the show more. And so I just became obsessed with both of them. And now, yeah, also every fall, we need to talk about why the fall is the perfect time to rewatch Gilmore Girls. But every fall, I rewatch Gilmore Girls. I kind of just pick up where I left off last year. So unfortunately, this year I kind of watched like the beginning to end of season 6 and am now towards the end of season 7. So literally the worst parts of the show. But that just means I get to start at a good place next year. So I'm already pre-excited.
You get to start fresh. And also, once you get to the end of the actual show, you get to then do the revival. Have we talked about the revival? Do you like it?
I don't know if we've talked about it. We can have our live discussion about it on the pod.
We'll do that after. Let's do that after. Let's talk about the show proper first.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know how, because there are 7 seasons. What were you thinking?
Okay, so first of all, I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about the creator behind it and I guess some of the overall themes, and then we can just get into like the specific characters and even episodes or arcs that we like.
Sounds good.
So yeah, the showrunner for the show and the creator is Amy Sherman Palladino.
ASP.
Her and you guys would also probably know her now. She's show running The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel.
Yeah.
She's done like other stuff too. She's a very competent TV showrunner and writer. Yeah, and so this is kind of like her baby, this show, and I know her husband as well, Daniel, I think, right? Palladino, has also written a bunch of episodes. So between the two of them, it was kind of like their thing, and it is the more traditional TV format, right, where they have like a writer's room, so there's other writers, but they kind of all break it, like the story of a season together, and then even if other writers write an episode, since she's like the showrunner, the script goes through her, so she gets to then say like, okay, cool, I'll do little rewrites here and there to make it like more sound in her style. And I guess like overall what this show is about is like 3 generations of like women in this one family and how they're all just the worst humans alive. I don't, it's so funny to talk about this show because it has this reputation as like this feel-good show that people watch, but at the same time everyone is so unbelievably like frustrating.
Yeah.
And like by design, and I think that's what makes it like such a good drama, is that like no one gets to just be like the perfect right person. Like everyone is so flawed, and it's what makes it interesting. And at least in the really good episodes, which are generally the episodes that ASP wrote or her husband wrote. Yeah, so that's kind of like what the show's about. Yeah. So Carol, let me ask you a question here, since we're talking about ASP a little bit.
Okay.
We talked a little bit about this off camera, but or I guess I should say off mic because no one can really see us.
I mean, we are also on camera. Gotta have that combo feel.
True. So this show like very much was her baby.
Yeah.
And she show ran it for the first 6 seasons, and then her and her husband left in season 7.
That was a mistake.
Yeah, big mistake. And the show kind of takes a huge dip in quality in season 7. Doesn't end at all the way it was supposed to end. It just feels like, what is this? And also, even in season 6, some things were starting to get kind of weird. You kind of felt like maybe there was like studio stuff going on or whatever, because it didn't really feel like what the rest of the show feels like. So one question I have for you is, how do you deal with, or what are your thoughts on, even throughout seasons 1 to 5, the sharp turns in quality that episodes can have depending on who's writing it? Because this to me, like we've talked a little bit before about how like part of what made The West Wing so unique for like an American show is that since Aaron Sorkin wrote every episode, there's like a consistent level of like quality and tone within episodes, which generally doesn't happen with American shows. That's normally like reserved for like a Fleabag, like a British show. But man, do I wish every episode of this show was written by her, because they're like the way some characters are handled when they're not written by her is so frustrating.
I know, especially like, I mean, she's admitted it that Lorelai is like a lot based on her. So like having her written by anyone else is always weird. I don't know. It's like, because I've only ever watched, like binge watched it, it's kind of harder to tell, I guess. And especially because it is, like, they have so many characters at play at all times. Like, even though it is mostly just, like, Lorelai and Rory and whoever they interact with. Like, I think having the distraction of the townspeople, even in a bad episode, which I think in some bad episodes heavily rely on them, helps. Like, it's nice that if it was, like, actually a drama or, like, a Fleabag where it had something like that important to say. Because, like, okay, yeah, this is, like, a show about 3 generations of women. Great. But, like, it didn't have this like crazy deep life-changing thesis or anything, so I think going into it with that mindset, like, it is a little bit of an annoying aspect, but it never ruined it for me. And I think it's also just because of how much care like she took into like fleshing out the world, that even if sometimes the characters or the plots or the dialogue like was a little off, like just the fact that it was still set in that same like bubble of Stars Hollow that is truly a place that could never really exist, it still felt like fine enough.
Sure.
That obviously we've all watched every episode how many times now.
Yeah.
Can't bother us that much, Marco.
No, yeah. Yeah, it's I agree with you on that. I think it overall, like, there is enough stuff that goes on even within the town, and you're right, like there are episodes that feel like it really relies on them. And then to your point, I think it's like it's so hard, and to what we were talking about earlier, these characters can be so frustrating, and it really takes like a steady hand, and I think in specific her hand, or I would say her husband's hand, because clearly like the two of them together have like a connection as human beings to like guide these characters in episodes, where otherwise it does sometimes come across like Emily is being so obnoxious that you cannot even find a way into that character. Whereas I feel like when ASP writes that, even when she's being the worst human alive, there's like a way into that character and that perspective. And same goes with Lorelai and Rory. Speaking of Rory, is Rory the most unlikable protagonist of a major TV show maybe ever? After like... Yeah, because... And it's so weird because, like, almost immediately after season 1, she just devolves into the worst. And I know that that's the point. Yeah. Like, but it's really, it can be very frustrating to watch.
Well, especially, like, in season 1, they introed her as, like, this overachieving, super smart bookworm girl. And, like, I was like, okay, like, fair, relatable, me in high school. And then just, like, to see her go forward and turn into, like, it just, especially when she got to Yale, like, a lot of the stuff that went down there, which I'm sure we'll get to, just, like, it made no sense. Like, I get it, like, there's influences just being a girl in high school and boys and friends, but just, it was just an unbelievable, like, inhuman almost, like, her reactions to things and some of her choices, it just made no sense. But, and also I'm sure it didn't help that, like, when Alexis Bledel started, like, this was her first acting role. She was just a model. Like, she didn't...
Was she really just a model?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
The first time she ever acted in anything. And they cast her just because she was, like, innocent.
Okay.
And, like, looked the part. And that was kind of it.
That's
and, like, you could
funny.
tell.
You can, but I'll say this. It's funny because so I'm in season 5 right now, and I just watched an episode where she has a line delivery. I don't even remember what it was, but there was this line delivery, and I was like, you're not even acting in this scene. You just said the line. Like, you just literally said the line. And it's so funny because normally in shows like this, when a character, like, grows up, when an actor grows up with a character, like, you can see them start to mature as an actor. But I actually feel like when she was younger and more of a kid, it was easier to take that in because I was like, she's just a kid. But then she gets older and doesn't really mature as an actor a lot. Yeah. Which definitely, I think, goes to why her character can be so frustrating.
Yeah.
But to your point, like, I understand that the overall, I guess, thesis of the show, and even why the revival ends the way it does, and why that was always the intention for how the show is going to end, is the idea that, like, Lorelai takes such a hard left turn from the way her mother parented her, but then ultimately, like, her child ends up more or less in the same place she was in.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be like, well, like, nobody knows exactly how to do it, and like realistically it's got to be somewhere in the middle, and like whatever. I think that's totally fine. But yeah, it is so frustrating, and maybe it's just because of the length of the show. Maybe it would have worked better as like a 4-season thing that ends like after high school. I don't know, but as it goes on, and like you said, especially as she gets into Yale, she goes from like a failed overachiever into just an awful, like deplorable human being who like drops out of school because she got a negative comment one time from a person.
That truly, I think, is my biggest pet peeve with the show.
Yeah,
that happened. One guy said one mean thing to her, and she's like, "Oh, I can't be a writer. I need to quit life. I'm gonna just pick garbage on the side of the street. That's better than going to Yale." I can't believe that happened.
I can't either.
I also can't believe that they had... I mean, we're really going all over the place, but I'm certain if you're listening to this episode, you've seen all of Gilmore Girls and you'll be fine with it.
Yeah, just to be clear, like, there's no real other way to talk about it other than we're just going to talk about stuff we think of with the show.
Yeah, but, like, one other thing that really irked me was that her high school boyfriend, Dean, Jared Padalecki, generally fine dude, marries the next girlfriend he has, supposedly.
Yes.
And then Rory sleeps with him while he's still in this relationship.
Yeah.
That also, I couldn't believe was a story point.
Very strange that was a story point. And yeah, it really, and also like to then have him be brushed aside so quickly after, because they like get together. She like ruins, or I don't want to say she ruins their marriage. Like it was Dean's choice too,
issues,
but yeah, but whatever. The marriage ends. They get together, and then like 3 episodes later, they break up again.
Just because Rory was hanging out with rich people.
Yes,
basically.
Like at a party that her grandparents threw for her.
Yeah, it was like a surprise, and like they forced her to be there. Yeah. Didn't tell her their true intentions, which I mean always happened. Really, let's be real.
Classic. Yeah.
Classic Emily and Richard.
Classic.
But yeah. I think they were just like, okay, bye, we're done with this character.
Well, and I guess this is my problem with, I don't want to say a lot of the characters, but a lot of Rory's boyfriends is, I think they had like the idea of all of them, but okay, so this is one of my bigger problems with the show in general. I really like the show. I think Lorelai and all of Lorelai's boyfriends are all handled well until we get later into the show where shenanigans happens, and I don't like that. But I mean, I'm talking like Max Medina and Christopher and Luke, and even like I don't like Digger. Can we talk about Digger? Is like the worst, but I think he's even handled well. Yeah,
and honestly, like they worked. Like I get it.
Yes, I do too. But it's so funny to me that for as well as that's all handled, like all of Rory's boyfriends are so frustrating throughout the show, and they all like, I get what they're all like supposed to symbolize. Like I understand that Dean is supposed to be like just a like simple dude, like whatever, overall just like generally quote unquote like nice guy type thing, like first boyfriend. Jess is like the cool rebel whatever, and then like Logan comes in and Logan's kind of like Christopher. But what's so frustrating to me about all of this, and I'm sure I know this is going to lead to us talking about Team Dean or Team Jess. And my answer to you is I can't...
Team Logan is an option.
I think I would have to be Team Logan, but I'll tell you why. I would have to be Team Logan because Logan is always Logan. Like, from moment one, Logan is a rich kid, like, kind of a... I don't want to say brat, but just like a rich guy who doesn't necessarily have a lot of regard for things and kind of just does what he wants and is very adventurous, and like Rory's into that, whatever. Not that that's like who I think she should be with, but at least that character is that character. Yeah. My biggest problem with the whole Dean Jess saga, if you want to call it that, is that whoever she's not with is written to be the idealistic version of themselves, and whoever she's with is like Satan. And it's so frustrating because like Dean is clearly established as just this like nice dude, cares about Rory, yeah, he's not like the most educated. He's not going to be super rich, but like Lorelai gets along with him. Just a nice, overall decent human being.
Yeah.
But then, like, when Jess starts flirting with Rory, he like corners Rory, or he corners Jess like a gangster, and it's like, this is my town. And I'm like, he's like, get out. Like, no one wants you here. This is my town, dude. And he like threatens him, and I'm like, where did this go? Who's this guy?
Yeah, he truly turns into like textbook jealous boyfriend, macho man, like the second he is threatened.
Yeah, and then
So funny.
And Jess is written to be like quiet to everyone, but like nice to Rory, and then Jess and Rory end up together, and he is still instantly just like starts being an asshole to her.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, well, that's kind of a weird turn. And then even when Dean is with his wife, and it's just like, whenever she's not with someone, they're like the best version of themselves. And then as soon as she's with them, it's like, well, we instantly have to like create a problem here.
Like, I wonder if that was a decision just in that, like, they needed to continue conflict, because they couldn't have, like, two of these, like, great men or, like, two of these, like, horrible men, because then we wouldn't really care. If they, like, were consistently really great or really bad, there wouldn't be, like, a pull to go from one to the other, and, like, they needed a reason. Or I wonder if it has something to do with, like, Amy Sherman-Palladino's relationship to men as a teenager. Because I feel like, because she puts a lot of herself in this show, like, I think she just has a weird relationship with men and intimacy and sex and love.
Sure.
And, like, it kind of manifests in really weird ways. Like, Lane getting married and, like, hating to have sex, and her mother, like, telling her that sex is horrible, and then she ends up having twins the first time she ever sleeps with someone. Or even, like, the circumstances of Rory's first time. Like, nothing, like, it almost always seemed like something that needed to be punished. And yeah, anytime someone like gets in what could be a healthy relationship, like something has to go wrong, and like it's kind of sad that was always the case. But yeah, I don't know if that was just like a make the show dramatic type thing, or her like airing some shit out. But
I mean, I think realistically it's probably a combination of the two. I mean, I think it probably starts from a place of, obviously there needs to be drama, like they can't just be happy.
Yeah.
But what I would say is, otherwise like the show would just end. But what I would say is, what's so frustrating is, like, with Lorelai, it seems like anytime there was drama within guys with Lorelai, it always came from them being, like, really specific, well-rounded characters, and, like, the characters had drama. You know what I mean? Like, when, like, for example, again, like, I just finished season 4 into season 5, and she's with Luke.
Yeah.
And Christopher has, like, his dad just passed away, and so she goes to comfort Christopher, and so there's like tension between her and Luke, but that doesn't feel like anyone being an asshole. It just feels like her being like, look, this guy is the father of my child, and I've known him since I was a kid, and Luke being like, I get it, but also it's kind of weird that you like spent the night there drinking tequila, and everyone's still who they are, and no one like goes to the extreme. Whereas with Rory's boyfriends, it feels like the opposite of that. It feels like, I don't know, we don't know how to figure out a way to do this in terms of who they are, so it's just, one of them is always the worst. Like, that's just the solution.
And, like, if only there was a reason, like, if they could write a way to make that make sense, because it truly didn't. Like, even Dean, when they meet, like, he recognizes the book that she drops, and then the second Jess is introduced, they, like, make it seem like he's never read a book in his life, and just wants to watch Lord of the Rings 100 times, and, like, that's his personality.
Yeah.
Which, like, fair. Like, you could probably relate, but...
I can't relate. Except I have read a lot of books. But even that, you're right. It's just... It seems very inconsistent, and it feels like we just need to get to the next place we need to be at. And it's frustrating. And like I said, like, it's done so well with every guy Lorelai's with that a part of me wonders if it... Not to criticize anyone's ability to write, but a part of me wonders if it is that thing of, the writers in the writer's room going, how do we write, like, teenage stuff? We're all adults, and so we can totally write the adult drama, like, aspects really well, but when it comes to the teenage stuff, like, I don't know, maybe
They're
this...
just too far removed from high school.
Yeah, I mean, you see that, though.
Yeah.
It happens all the time. Like, I've listened to a lot of interviews with writers... Oh, God, here we go. I'm going to bring them up.
It's too soon.
It's okay. Not getting into any of the other stuff, but I was listening to an interview with the writer of The Social Network, who I may talk about later. And he was saying how there's that famous first scene in The Social Network between Mark Zuckerberg and his girlfriend at the time. Yeah. And he said, like, when he was first writing that scene, he was trying really hard to write it as young people. And he was like, it was just awful every time I wrote it. And so he said at a certain point, he was like, well, fuck it. They're just going to have to talk like how every character I write talks, because I don't know how to write this for a young person. And a lot of the drama with Rory and her boyfriends feels like no one really being sure how to write that for a young person. And I think that's where a lot of the, like, people flip-flopping all the time comes in.
Because I feel like even in the writing, like, sometimes they would try to, like, write as a teenager, but then also sometimes they'd give up. And, like, I think also just because this was, like, a theme, like, Rory, because she was raised by just her mother, like, talks a lot like her mother, so she talks fast and has all these references to pop culture that no other person her age would know about. And so I think that, like, let them off the hook, at least with her character specifically sometimes. And it, like, helped that a lot of the dialogue is, like, between Rory and Lorelai, so you're never like, it's weird that she doesn't talk like a teenager, because obviously she doesn't. So I think at least that, like, helped, that sometimes with Rory specifically, they were able to not have to, like, flex that teenage brain that obviously they didn't really know what to do.
Yeah. No, for sure. And I think you see that in the guy characters, because it's like they don't have that excuse and they have no idea how to write them in a consistent way. They always write them in a way of what does the plot need, instead of coming from the perspective of who are these people and what have we shown them to act like. Which is why I think that stuff gets very, very frustrating.
Speaking of guys, I just found this out on Wikipedia. I mean, I knew that in the pilot, Luke was a woman, like the cafe owner was a woman.
Really?
Yeah. Also in the pilot, Suki was played by Alex Bornstein, from, like, Mad TV and stuff, who, like, eventually played, like, the harp player and whatever. They had to, like, actually reshoot all of her scenes with Melissa McCarthy because she wasn't able to get out of her Mad TV contract. But yeah, so Luke was originally a woman, and the only reason they changed it, I thought it was because, like, maybe ASP thought about it and was like, we actually needed, like, a romantic character to be consistent or something, because obviously Lorelai couldn't be a lesbian or bisexual, has not in 2000.
Not 2000.
But apparently the network just said they had to change it because there weren't enough men on the show. That was a specific critique, and I was like, interesting.
Awesome. That's so weird.
That's so funny. Yeah, I just read that today, and I wanted to share, because I really never thought that would be the reason, but I guess, like, without him, I suppose it would just be the, like, grandpa, and, like, I guess boyfriends, but...
Boyfriends and, like, Christopher.
That's not steady. Yeah.
That's interesting. I mean, I feel like it's one of those things of a really weird circumstance that probably leads to overall something that is, like, positive, because I really like Luke as who he is in the show, so it's like, but that's so weird that that's the method by which that all came around. I had no idea. Okay, so just to quickly touch on, I have one more kind of major thing I want to talk about regarding Rory, which is, like we said, she goes to this prep school. Oh, and by the way, to one positive thing, I really love when she first starts going to the prep school, like the high school. Chilton. Yeah. That she is just, like, incapable of doing stuff at first. Because I remember watching the show for the first time and being like, wow, that's great. You're the smartest person in a high school of, like, like a small town idiots. Like, good for you. And then she gets there, and she just sucks at everything and is, like, getting killed. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's good. Like, I'm glad that they did that.
She didn't show up and was also the smartest person at Chilton.
Yes. Like, she had to work her way up to it, which felt interesting to me and felt like good writing. But, like we talked about, she goes to Yale. Now, this is something else, like with the boyfriends, I have a real problem with. Okay? Because it is so ingrained that she's going to go to Harvard.
Yes.
At the start of the show.
Yeah.
To the point where when she's doing her college applications, there are multiple episodes where Lorelai freaks out that she's applying elsewhere. There's like one
Yeah.
episode where they're having dinner and she finds out that Rory had to apply elsewhere and she gets like pissed that Rory didn't tell her. And then there's another episode where Richard, like the grandfather, sets up a meeting at Yale.
Yes.
And Rory like,
a
or not
big
Rory,
deal.
Lorelai like just doesn't talk to her. She's like, fuck you guys.
Technically
and then,
both named Lorelai, but...
Yes, technically. And then Rory gets accepted to both. And for no discernible reason whatsoever, Lorelai is suddenly like, yeah, I think Yale's probably the better school for you. And I was like, it just felt like the boyfriend thing of like, I was trying to dissect it in my head because I was like, okay, here's the thing. The way that she was written before, there is no way that this decision, like, either A, they always intended for her to go to Harvard, or there's three options. That's A. Option B, which I think is likely, is that they intended for Lorelai to have some type of change of heart, but just in terms of the way the show was plotted out, they didn't have enough time to really like explain that character turn for her, which is probably the most likely. But here's three, and I was thinking about this, and I don't think it's true because I'm pretty sure all the Yale stuff was still filmed on like a set. Like I don't think that was filmed on location. Like it looks like a set.
They filmed at a couple of other, like, universities, I think in LA, like, for a few, like, of the first episodes in university, but the rest was just a set.
I figured. So the reason I bring that up is because I know that Harvard is notoriously shitty about letting people film there. Like, The Social Network wasn't allowed to film at Harvard campus. They had to film at like another college. Like Harvard like refuses to let people film there. So
Weird.
Before I got to the season where Rory was actually at Yale for this rewatch and I couldn't remember if they actually shot on campus or not, I was like, wait a fucking minute. Did they have to do this heel turn because Harvard wouldn't let them shoot there? But then they get there and it was a set and I was like, okay, no, it can't be that. It has to be that they just like didn't plot out the timing right to actually have Lorelai do that turn. But yeah, that pissed me off.
I guess because, like, their whole thing with the show is, like, it's interesting because everyday life is interesting. So it's not anything crazy. It's just the day-to-day stuff. So I was like, did they plan, like, this university switch to be one of the day-to-day crazinesses of life with a teenage daughter?
I know.
Like, we have to change her Harvard wall to a Yale wall. Also, that would be so fucking expensive. For this single mother who supposedly was, like, living in poverty for so long to have all of that Yale or Harvard and then all of a sudden Yale memorabilia was probably, like, over $1,000. Like, one piece of university merch is, like a hoodie is, like, $200.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's insane.
The whole thing is just, like, it's so silly. It doesn't make any sense. Like, it does, like... It makes sense on paper that her mom really wanted Harvard because she feels like Yale's the school her parents went to. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And so it's like, well, she's trying to keep that separate. Yes. Yeah. But, yeah, it just feels weird to me that there's never some kind of, like, reconciliation with her parents that then leads to her being comfortable with Rory going to Yale. You know what I mean? It feels like there was an arc missing. It was like there's something missing here that was supposed to be there that explains this turn.
It was off screen, but Lorelai went to therapy for a couple months. She talked it through. It was fine.
Like she would definitely need to because she is messed up.
Okay, well, so if she went to therapy, there wouldn't be a show.
Exactly. Well, exactly. Let's maybe talk about Lorelai then as the next, I guess, protagonist of the show.
Lorelai,
what are your thoughts?
Who gave birth at 16 and named her child after her. Can you imagine? Like,
I know.
I don't think as a teenager, I mean, first of all, I wouldn't have a baby as a teenager. But if I did, I wouldn't be like, I'm going to name her my name.
Yeah.
That is so funny to me. But I guess it says a lot about her and her personality.
Yes.
Because, like, she does really love herself. I feel like she's, like, that was actually kind of comforting to see. Just, like, a woman who, like, is never really self-conscious. Like, she just goes around and says what she wants and eats what she wants and talks to who she wants about whatever. Like, she seems very, very comfortable in herself, which I think was actually, like, part of her charm. Like, I mean, obviously that's, like, her whole thing. Everyone is obsessed with her and loves her and this town accepted her with open arms, which I imagine in any other small town would be tough.
Right.
But also, this is fake. But yeah, she probably held the show together. Like, if there wasn't a Lorelai, like someone who was written so well and Lauren Graham acting it so well, like, I don't think I would like the show as much as I do. Like, truly, she is the star. Like, it steals every scene, except sometimes Emily, because she's also great. But, like, Lauren Graham truly makes the show.
Yeah, she is far and away the best part of the show, and I think it just goes to show, like you were saying, I've also heard, just reading interviews, ASP talking about the fact that this is just, like, as much as any character will ever be her on screen. Yeah. And there's even scenes, like, I think there's, like, a funeral episode where Lorelai's wearing, like, a black top hat, and I was like, oh my god, are you kidding? I was like, are you kidding me? I can't believe I never realized this before. But, yeah, and to your point, it is, like, the perfect combination of, it's so well written at all times.
Yeah. At
most times. Occasionally, there's, like, heel turns here or there. But even when she's being frustrating within her character. Yeah. And Lauren Graham is incredible, like, at all times. Like, she is always so engaging on screen. Even when it's an episode not written by ASP and maybe the dialogue isn't quite there, like, she still brings the energy to it in the right way. Yeah, she's great. Yeah, she totally holds the show together. You're right. And when her and Emily are, like, arguing on screen together, that's like the best. Like, it doesn't get better than that. Those two on screen together absolutely kill it. Like, I don't think you could have casted those roles better at all. Like, it's no. Yeah, like, not just how they play their own roles, but their chemistry with each other as well. It's like, I totally buy this as a really fucked up mother-daughter relationship. Like, truly. It genuinely feels like they have, like, 30 years of history between them.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, it just feels so genuine, and obviously that's, like, credit to the actors and the script, and like, this isn't the only show or movie that has, like, two well-written characters in a relationship.
Sure.
But yeah, just something about it did feel so real, and like you mentioned, like, some scripts, like, had some weird arcs or feelings for both of those characters, but they still acted it to the best of their ability and made it watchable. And apparently they had to steal Lauren Graham from another show. Like, she was, like, on a show that only ever filmed 8 episodes and showed 4. I, like, tried to look into it more, but, like, there wasn't even, like, a poster I could find. So weird. Obviously didn't, like, take off, but she was signed on for the show, I think at, like, NBC or something, and they made her audition anyway. And then we're like, hey, so, like, if your show's canceled, but by the time we start filming this one, you're hired.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad it worked out the way it did, because that show did get canceled, and I think it worked out for the best. Yeah,
I think that works out the best for everyone involved.
But also, I don't think I've seen Lauren Graham in anything else other than Bad Santa.
Oh, well... this is going to relate to a funny plot twist I have to tell you about later, but continue.
Yeah, and so, like, I don't know if, like, it's just because this role was so good for her, because, like, even in she was fine in Bad Santa, but, like, it's kind of hard to judge her abilities as an actress in that role, so I don't know. I don't know if she's good at anything else. I know she's been in, like, Parenthood and, like, other things, but have you seen other things, or is this going to spoil your plot twist later?
I have seen one other thing, and it will spoil my plot twist. But no, I think she is good in things. It kind of, to me, feels like... this is a weird comparison, but it's like Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, he's so that I like, I haven't seen him in anything, like, since that show ended, really. I know he's in, like, a movie now on Netflix or whatever, but I feel like it's the same thing with her, where it's like, this was so specifically written, and it's like no one else could have played it, and that's great. I mean, when that happens, it's great, right? But then it's so hard for... I think a lot of time, like, casting directors or whatever just have trouble, like, getting these people roles because they feel like no one will buy them in anything else, which is total bullshit, by the way. Like, that's ridiculous. Anytime I've ever seen a great actor in one thing who totally encompasses that, it's like, when they're in something else, you forget instantly because they're a great actor, and they just, like, they immerse themselves. And I mean, and I'm sure between the 7 seasons and the revival, and I know she's like wrote a book about it, she's probably fine to not have to work.
True.
So maybe that's part of it. I know a lot of actors are like that too, where it's like, I did my thing and I'm good and, whatever. So I don't know, but I think she is, from other stuff I've seen, competent outside of this role. I don't think it was just like a one-hit wonder.
Good to know.
Yeah. Should we talk about Emily, I guess? Let's go through the main Gilmore Girls and then we can hit the side cast.
Emily and Richard.
We can talk about Emily and Richard.
Yeah, I mean, they are a couple. Obviously more
true.
about Emily because, I don't know, Richard is usually just off on business or reading a newspaper. I think they just wanted him mostly for, like, the name and an occasional moment, but truly, I don't think he was ever meant to. But it is obviously focusing on the 3 women, so he was never meant to be that important. So yeah, mostly Emily, but Emily is great. What a powerhouse. Although, I mean, obviously, they're both very rich people, and, like, that kind of insane wealth is always hard to watch and justify.
Sure.
Because it's annoying to see them complaining about the maids and having to switch them out every week, which, like, is a funny runner that I can't believe they actually, like, carried through to every single season.
Yeah. It is very funny.
She never also remembers the names or, like, when and if she fired them or for what reason.
They're also just, like, impossibly rich.
Yeah.
Like, they're, like, richer than Bruce Wayne rich. When you think about, like, collectively over the show, all the stuff that they spent money on, it's like, holy fuck. Like, these people aren't just rich. They are, like, like, comic book fucking person rich.
Well, that's the thing. It was, like, inheritance, and then I guess, like, the insurance business or whatever the hell Richard does makes so much money.
Yeah.
And Emily doesn't even work. It makes no sense. But yeah.
I know.
And it's, that aside, her as a character, I mean, just, I guess it was really interesting to see 2 different approaches to motherhood. Yeah. Because obviously, like, they kind of ended up the same, like, the 2 daughters, but yeah, I don't know, like, it's hard because we only saw, like, a few flashbacks, and we know that, like, obviously Emily, like, pushed Lorelai to be in, like, cotillions and all the fancy rich people stuff that I'm sure would be annoying to have to do as, like, a teenage girl who just wants to, like, figure out who you are. But yeah, I don't know, I feel like almost Lorelai's response was kind of, like, unwarranted. Yeah. Like, it was, like, especially, like, after having Rory to, like, basically cut off communication entirely for, like, 15, 16, however many years is insane. Because, I mean, there could be more to it, but, like, the story as it's told is just, like, a mother who was, I guess, probably doing whatever she was taught to do, like, the way she was raised. I'm sure she had to go to cotillions and do all that stuff, and, like, I don't know, your parents always, like, tell you what they want you to do, and you can obviously go your own way, and, like, they'll maybe be disappointed or mad or upset or not understand, but I don't know, it was just, it's insane. And so it was interesting to then have this kind of show pick up at their, like, reconciliation point, but, like, forced reconciliation because she needed money. I think the show does such a good job, and this is, like, I think what the show does best, honestly, is that as much as it can show Emily being the villain sometimes, the way her motivations are set up and Lorelai's reactions to them makes you genuinely feel for Emily sometimes, which is, like, something that is so it's so crazy that they pull it off, because it shouldn't, like, Emily should just be the villain and you should side with Lorelai, but it's, like, it's so complex at all times, and I think they do such a good job of showing how Lorelai's actions also affect Emily, and how much it must suck to do the thing that all parents do in a lot of ways, like you said. I mean, obviously they're cartoonish in a way that, because they're so rich and it's so crazy. But yeah, to pass on the values that to some degree they were passed on, and Lorelai is rejecting that, which is, like, normal. But
that whole dynamic between them to be as crazy as it is, and also just from one scene to the next to be able to flip-flop between who you're like siding with. Like, one episode that always sticks out in my mind with this is when Lorelai is graduating business school, which I think is like season 2 or 3. I don't
definitely
remember.
one of those. I think it's season 2. Yeah, no, it's definitely season 2.
Okay. Yeah, so that episode always sticks out to me because, like, Lorelai goes so out of her way to talk to Rory about, like, how she doesn't want her parents to be there. And then when they, like, Rory does tell them about it and they do go. And at first when they do go, like, you're still kind of with Lorelai because they're being really hectic and, like, setting up to take pictures or whatever. But then it goes all the other way around to where, like, when she's actually, like, walking across the stage or whatever. And like it's totally dialogueless, but you totally understand. You're like, yeah, I get it. Like, I understand like what this must be like for Emily to have not been there through anything else positive that's ever happened in Lorelai's life. And it's like,
the birth of her granddaughter, like anything at all.
Yeah, and so you get a scene like that where you're like, fuck, like Lorelai's actually the worst. And you feel so bad for Emily. But then, like, on the other side of that, you'll get, like, there's the flashback of when Lorelai first found out she was pregnant.
Yeah.
And you go through that, and then when she's at the hospital, like, being wheeled in to give birth, and Emily is just, like, chewing her out, and, like, being like, why would you do this? Like, you're terrible. You didn't leave a note, whatever. And so, yeah, it does such a good job of going between the two, and it's, like, I get why that would be frustrating for Lorelai, but also I think, like, Emily's just truly trying to do what she think is right at all times. Like, I don't think Emily's ever trying to be vindictive, and even like in season 5 we just got to the point where something very crazy happened where she like brings Christopher to the renewal of her and Richard's vows to try and break up Lorelai and Luke, which it kind of ends up working.
Yeah.
And Lorelai shuts her out.
Those plots are wild.
Very wild.
A genius.
Yes. Crazy. But then there's a really great moment between Emily and Luke where Emily goes to the diner and is like, look, this is nothing personal. I was truly just trying to do what I thought was right. Clearly it's wrong and I don't want to lose my daughter. So, like, go ahead and be with her. Like, I'm not going to stand in the way of it anymore. And you're like, okay, and also not just with Emily, and maybe like we can transition to some other side characters, but that's something that like ASP seems really good at showing. And like another example I had with that was actually Lane's mom, because Lane's mom most of the time is a cartoonish villain. Yes. Like, to the point where you're like, no one is like this.
Yeah.
Like, I know people with strict parents and no one is like this. But then there's that great episode where Lane like sneaks out to go with her band to like perform at a gig, and you don't. Yes, and you don't cut back to her house at all. It's like she's with Rory, and Rory finds out, she sneaks out, and then Rory calls Lorelai, and there's a bunch of stuff going on in there. And as soon as Lorelai finds out, she's like, "Okay, cool. Well, I have to call your mom now." And Rory's like, "Why would you do that? Like, you're supposed to be on our side." And she's like, "No, because I get it." And she like hangs up with them and calls Lane's mom, and they cut back to like their house, and Lane's mom is there with like the police and everything, and she's like freaking out. And yeah, I think it just does such a good job of, as much as like she's such a pain in the ass and we're supposed to relate with the younger characters, of like giving these moments where you're like, okay, like they are just trying to do the right thing, and like they're doing it the wrong way, but they're not like evil.
Well, but that's like the genius of this show almost. Like, somehow they're able to write these characters, like both the mother and the daughter, to have like some of the most stereotypical worst traits or experiences, like your mother like not approving of your partner and trying to set you up with someone else, or like the child getting pregnant at 16, and like, so some of the like worst things that you'd think would be like almost like unsurmountable, like you just can't come back from that, like there's no way to redeem the character, like somehow eventually you end up liking them again.
Yep.
And like it all makes sense, and you're like, oh yeah, no, I get it. Like, because sometimes people like complain about their mother and they're like, they did this, they did that, and like it seems like she took every complaint she ever heard about a mother and like put that into Emily at some point throughout the 7 seasons.
For sure.
And like you still sympathize with her, I mean, sometimes it truly is like, what were you thinking? Obviously, this is a plot of a supervillain. Like, you must have seen this. There's no way you didn't. But still, at the end of the day, like, even at the beginning when I was talking about her, like, I understand. Like, she also, like, it must have been so hard to not have talked to her own daughter for, like, 16 years and her granddaughter. And, like, I think they also did a really good job at showing that kind of side of the relationship when sometimes they brought back that character Mia, who, like, first let Lorelai, like, live in, like, the shed of the Independence Inn, and like, technically she was kind of like the surrogate grandmother, and, like, saw Rory grow up and stuff, and, like, seeing how much that pained Emily. Like, of course that was something that we obviously, like, assumed that not being there for that part of her daughter and granddaughter's life was hard, but I guess for some people who maybe, like, wouldn't be able to picture it or, like, feel that empathy, like, they did put in that, like, very obvious like, explanation of it, and that was also, like, really beautiful to see, and kind of makes up for all of the evilness, because there was a lot of pain there.
Yeah, no, they do. There's a couple of those moments, and I think as the show goes on, they become a bit more cartoon villain. Yeah. But
for sure.
I think in the show's inception, in its, like, what it's supposed to be when it's at its best, which I would say is probably the first 4 seasons, and, like, well, we'll not spoil stuff. Probably the first, So let's in the first 4 seasons, like, there's so many great moments like that. Like, when Mia comes, that's, like, heartbreaking when she, like, meets her at the inn or whatever, and she's like, Mia's like, well, let's just, like, have lunch. And she's like, why would you think I would want to have lunch with you? Like, you have no idea, like, what this. And then also there's another one that I totally forgot about until this rewatch, which is like really was like a slap across the face, where it's like, fuck. And it's when Emily first comes to Stars Hollow by herself, and her and Rory are spending the day together, and she's showing her around, and then she takes her to, like, that shed.
Have to give her new shoes.
Yes, they have to give her new shoes, and, like, it's this really sweet thing. And as it was happening, I was like, oh no, something's gonna happen. Like, there's gonna be some kind of shoe drop. Like, this is too nice. It can't just end like this. And Rory takes her to, like, the shed behind the inn that her and Lorelai, like, lived in, and that was another moment. And we're like, Emily just, like, it's like heart-wrenching to see her reaction. And I don't know, I can't remember the actress's name that plays Emily, but she does such a good job. I would say probably the best in the series out of everyone. Like, everyone, Kelly Bishop. I don't want to say everyone, but most people handle the dialogue really well.
Yeah. I mean,
but
they didn't
Emily,
have a choice.
Yes, but Emily's one of the few that handles the dialogue really well, but then also in those just, like, seeing something moments.
Yeah.
Is, like, so good at, like, completely dialogueless. Like, you're there with her of, like, oh shit, that is fucking awful. Like, to have to go through that is awful. I can't believe that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, she's, like, a very experienced actress. So
for sure.
It's, like, not surprising. But, yeah, no, she was so, so good.
Yeah. All right, should we move into some of the side characters of the show?
Yeah, who are you thinking? Like, Lane?
We can talk about Lane. Before we talk about Lane, I want to give an honorable shout out to Adam Brody, who is in the show for 1 season, plays Lane's first, I guess, kind of real boyfriend.
Yeah.
I loved him.
Good for her.
I loved his character.
He was so perfect.
I was doing some research on it, and the plan was for him to continue in the show, but he got signed on to another show, and that makes me so sad, because what happens with Lane and the band as the show progresses really sucks. Really sucks.
Yeah. This show, like, did, like, Chad Michael Murray was on season 1 before he got signed on to One Tree Hill. And then they got Adam Brody before he got signed on to the OC. So, I mean, they moved on to bigger and better things and made a bunch of money in their respective roles, and, like, good for them. But, I mean, Tristan we didn't need. I'm glad he had to go to One Tree Hill.
Yes,
that's fine.
Me too.
He was never that valuable of a character.
Exactly.
But yeah, no, definitely having, I don't even remember what the character's name was, but Adam Brody was so perfect for Lane, and it was so sweet. He read the whole Bible so many times in a night. It was just so nice, and, like, Lane deserved better. Yeah.
So Lane's character in a lot of ways is, I think, the show's like direct parallel to Lorelai growing up. Because, like you said, with the exception of like a flashback and Lorelai's accounts of the situation, we don't see her relationship with her mother. Yeah. And so I think Lane is a deliberate inclusion to try and be like a side kind of thing of, well, this is what that relationship was kind of like. And you know what I mean? Like, we kind of see it that way, which is why I guess overall, if you were just going to pitch me Lane's arc and say she starts as this person with a crazy mother who goes super hard and tries to rebel against it and then ends up like accidentally getting pregnant, and it's supposed to be like a parallel to Lorelai, that's fine. The way it's handled in the show really sucks. The way it's executed, it just feels off, and it really is when Adam Brody leaves the show that I kind of feel like they just didn't know what to do with Lane anymore at that point, because
even
things get
having
weird.
Her date and marry whatever his name was
Zach.
In the band, like, I don't know, like the chemistry never really made sense. And it just, I don't know, and it just felt so unnatural, and them getting married, like, I don't know, maybe like it was the actors didn't have chemistry, but it just, I don't know, I never was into it. It didn't make sense. It was literally just that he was there and they went for it. And the pregnancy was like a season 7 thing, so maybe that was just like the new showrunner, I don't know, not knowing what else to do with a woman married. I have no idea.
I guess.
But yeah, no, that sucked.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can definitely tell, like I said, like even in season 5 right now, Lane is definitely an afterthought. Whenever she pops up, it's always kind of like, oh yeah, this character is still in the show, and we don't really know what to do with her.
Yeah, that's sad too.
Yeah, because I like her. I like the actress that plays her.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of wish that, I mean, this may sound kind of dumb, but when they wrote Adam Brody off, if they like found a way for Lane to like, and the band to go with him, and they're gonna go like tour or something and like trying to have a career, because I truly feel like that would have been a more satisfying ending than what we end up getting with her, because it's like they didn't know what to do with her, and all those subplots are kind of like not really worthwhile. So
it would have been more true to her character, like especially since her whole thing was like the love of the music. Like her staying behind and staying in Stars Hollow was never really like a good venue for that anyway.
Right.
And especially settling down, I mean, like her whole, like, I don't know, she was like this girl against the man, like very much like she could have been taught by Dewey Finn from School of Rock. Like,
oh my God, I know. I know.
She had all those tenets in her head. She knew what to do, and then she just ends up getting married and having kids really young.
Yeah, it sucks.
And I don't even, I mean, maybe I'm incorrect, but I don't even think initially she was meant to be this parallel for Lorelai. I think that might have been like a season 7 decision, because
I could see that.
She was just based off of like Amy Sherman Palladino's like friend from childhood. Like the 7-Day Adventist thing and Strict Mom was like direct parallel from, like, her name was Helen Pye, and I think she also ended up being the costume designer on the show or something.
Oh, interesting.
But yeah, it was literally just Amy Sherman Palladino's friend was where she got a lot of the character traits and life stuff. So
yeah, they should have just had her leave when Adam Brody left. It would have been the perfect send-off. Like, that's the perfect amount that character needed. It's unfortunate. All right, who's left? Okay, we should probably talk about Luke. We haven't really talked about Luke. Yeah. What are your thoughts
important.
On Luke? Yeah.
I love Luke.
I love Luke also.
Yeah, he's another one of those characters, like you mentioned with Logan, who he is just himself.
Yes.
Like, we know from the beginning his beliefs, his mindset, his way of life. We are demonstrated to it. We get it. It stays the same the whole time. Like, Luke does not change, and I love that. He, like, I don't know, he just is such a, like, relatable, normal dude, especially surrounded by these, like, perfect, quirky, fast-talking girls and all of these crazy town folk. Like, he's the only one who makes sense. Like, everyone else is such a character that, like, they needed to have that one normal dude in Stars Hollow who just wants to run his diner and mind his own business.
Mm-hmm.
and it's like the perfect anchor throughout like the whole series. Like, sure, there's always like the will they, won't they, on again, off again business, but even though he is a part of that, he still is such like a calm constant throughout. Like, we know they're gonna get together eventually. He's always gonna be there. He's always gonna be good guy Luke, looking out for everyone, and that's always so comforting. And like, even, I don't know what it is about him, he looks so much like Nicolas Cage, but like, I still love him, but I don't like Nicolas Cage.
I've never ever thought of that.
Seriously?
But you're
it's
right.
The only thing I can think about. He is like a more attractive Nicolas Cage.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess you're right. That's weird. Now that I think about it, yeah, he kind of does. He has the same face shape. Huh.
Yeah.
Weird. But yeah, I'm with you. Luke is one of the few characters in this show that doesn't really do anything all that like unlikable or be flawed, which is interesting because, and I mean, I could totally be reading too much into this, and also like if you said Luke was originally supposed to be a female, I guess it probably wasn't intentionally this way, but I think in a lot of ways, like the dynamics of like men and women on television at the time are kind of switched in this show, because I think in like a traditional drama comedy during this time, it would be more like you would have a woman side character who was just kind of like always who they are and was really good at being who they are. And Luke kind of fills that role in this show, which is interesting to see that Lorelai's like fucked up to some degree and is like has to make all the hard decisions, and Luke is always there to help clean up the mess no matter what it is. It's a fun dynamic, and I love Luke. I think the actor that plays him is great in that role as well. I haven't seen him in anything else really either, but he is so that it's, you know, it's great. I love him. He's awesome. He's definitely who I want. I am happy Lorelai ends up with him. Like, as much as, unlike Rory's boyfriends, pretty much all of Lorelai's boyfriends, like, I could see her with. Like, even, like, if she got back together with Christopher, I feel like that could make sense because they have such good chemistry.
I mean, she did. They got married in Paris, Marco. That's where I'm at right now.
I know, but you know what I mean. Like, at the end of all things. They have such good chemistry together.
They really
do.
Her
and Max Medina, they have great chemistry together. Digger, they have great chemistry. I don't know, like, maybe Lauren Graham just has good chemistry with guys, because literally every guy they put her across from, like, I buy them as, like, a flirty couple. Like, so
actually,
easily.
I think by the end, I don't remember if I made this up, but I swear to God on Gilmore Guys, they talked about this a lot. I think Lauren Graham and Scott Patterson, like, were actively like fighting and like not friendly outside of filming for the last like season and a bit or something. Really? I might have made that up since it's been a long time since I listened, but I swear to God there was something like that.
Why? That's sad. That makes me sad.
I think like it's hard, like 7 years of like 30-hour days. I mean not a 30-hour day, but like just insane schedules. There's only so much you can put up with. Maybe like she was getting paid more or something. I don't know. Who knows? But yeah, no, it's definitely the chemistry was there with everyone. And you did say that like every decision like Luke made or whatever, you got it, or you like he didn't do anything bad. But I think him dealing with finding out about his daughter, obviously everyone hates that plot line.
Yeah, but that's...
and it's dumb. But just like the fact that he so actively like pushed her out and like refused to let her interact, or even like, I mean, first of all, that he didn't tell her about it for a while, which I understand the shock of it all. He had to get over that. That made sense. I wasn't even that mad about that, because obviously this is a life-changing news he's received, and he's obviously gonna freak out. So yeah, that makes sense. But I think then after she did find out, where he was still like, actually no, like you can never see her, I'm never gonna talk to her like to you about her. Like, that was all really frustrating. And then when she finally, like, was able to get into, like, April's life, that, like, then on the other side, April's mother was really upset about it. Like, that wasn't a Luke thing, but that whole scenario, I think because it's, like, one of the most recent things I watched, was so annoying. Like, I get it. Like, everyone's super protective over their children. But come on. Like, that was so... And, like, that was, I guess, ultimately... I mean, Lorelai cheating, but ultimately was one of the reasons for them breaking up in that time. It was so irritating.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I know that everyone talks about season 7 as being the bad season because that's when she left, but also
season 6
there's
is
lots
not
of
great either. Yeah.
Yeah, that to me feels again like, okay, we've overstayed our welcome and we're just trying to create new conflict between them where yeah, I don't even like, I just try to push that stuff aside because I'm like, I don't that's so stupid and like it's so yeah, it doesn't ring true for Luke. I'm with you on that. It's kind of shitty. So Kirk is Kirk like, I truly think if Kirk is played by anyone other than Sean Gunn, it would have been one of the most annoying characters in television. Yeah. But there's something about Sean Gunn that's just so sincere and like sweet and likable that every time he's on screen, I'm like, fuck yeah, Kirk's here.
I think Kirk had the most rewarding character arc like he always was doing these odd jobs and like seemed to work everywhere, and then in an eventual season it was revealed that he had so much money, enough to like buy a mansion essentially out from under Luke when Luke was trying to like buy that home for Lorelai. The fact that they took just him working everywhere, quirky, haha, and then eventually tied it into a bigger storyline, I loved so much. It made me so happy. Yeah, no, Kirk and Sean Gunn are so fantastic. I love that they found a way to tie him in, because I know like there was an earlier episode where Sean Gunn was like a different character. He like showed up to do some, I don't know, electrical work, who knows, and he had a different name, but I like that. I'm just so happy that they liked him enough to bring him back as a regular, because it was, he's one of the best townies for sure.
Yeah, I mean, he's a staple of the show. Like, he is, and he's great, and he always provides like the right amount of comic relief for a scene. And just everyone else in the town reacting to him. It's always great. One of my standouts is when Lorelai opens the new inn, and he's going to stay there with Lulu, and they've never like slept together, and he wants Luke to sleep next to him because he has night terrors, and he's like, but it's so perfectly paid off because Luke and Lorelai are having their first kiss outside the inn, and it's like the most satisfying moment. And then Kirk runs outside naked, like freaking out from a night terror, and Luke actually goes to chase him down and like try and get him. It's so good. It's like comic relief done perfectly right.
Yeah, when I was looking up like just summaries of every season just to jog my memory, because I only remember season 6 and 7 right now. That was definitely one of my favorite finales. I think maybe season 2, which is the finale at Suki's wedding, where like Jess comes back and Chris and Lorelai are together and it's perfect, but then Chris finds out that Sherry's pregnant. Yeah. And like that whole, I think that might be my favorite, but then season 3 with like that inn and Kirk and the kiss and unfortunately Rory sleeping with Dean is probably like my second favorite finale. Yeah. Just so good.
Yeah, it's great. I'm with you on that. It's so perfectly done.
Kirk. And I like how eventually he had his like company of it was something yummy waiters, or like
my God,
just half naked hot waiters. And there was some silly name for it, but that was so good. And I think it was Lane's wedding when Lorelai just like got really upset about like her wedding being postponed, and her obviously being like a lot older than Lane and not being able to have like one successful marriage got to her, and she had her whole like drunken speech, and then like having the cater like half naked men in the background was so funny at the same time.
Yeah, never a misstep with Kirk. Anything he's involved in is always great.
Yeah.
I want to give a shout out to Babette and Mrs. Patty. Miss Patty. So funny. Like, I've never seen those two actors in anything.
No.
Ever. Except this, and they're so fucking funny all the time.
I think they were in, like, older stuff that we probably just, like, wouldn't have seen for any reason.
No. I mean, they're just, like... Yeah, just incredible. Like, every scene they're in, I'm always laughing. Like, they're so funny. They remind me of almost like this is a weird comparison, but like the Golden Girls for some reason, like they have that same energy to me, like that same kind of humor, and it's super funny.
I feel like they are almost like an iconic duo, like a Chip and Dale or like a Mario and Luigi.
Sure.
Like they always need to be together and just having hijinks, and it's perfect.
Yep.
Every time.
I agree with you on that.
All of the plays and dances that Patty's able to put on just because that's her occupation, like leads to also some fun comedy sometimes.
Yeah.
I think there was one with like a bunch of children throwing like glitter and confetti into the crowd. That was probably one of my favorite shows she put on. Or like I think Kirk did like a reenactment of his birth or something via interpretive dance.
Yes. Well, I just watched one. It doesn't have to do with Miss Patty, but it's the one where they do Fiddler on the Roof and like at the school, but Kirk is like the main character for some reason. It's so funny. It's so stupid. Oh my god, I love it so much.
It was so smart of her to set it in like this small town, because that's really like the only place where you could get away with having shit like that happen.
Yes. Yeah.
And it being like even slightly plausible.
Yeah. Yeah, the town itself is like such a character in this, and it's so good. Yeah, it's so perfect. It's so pitch perfect. Like literally from the beginning of the show, it's like it's so clear what everything is, and like they just keep expanding upon it and make it even funnier and better. Mm-hmm. Taylor Dosey is the worst. He is literally a comic book movie villain.
Yeah.
I get it. Like, I totally get it. Like, I know that's who he is, but also, like, oh my god, sometimes I just want to punch him in the face.
Yeah, he didn't really have any of, like, the redeeming qualities that, like, Emily Say would have.
Exactly, yeah. No, he is just a terrible person.
He was, like, I guess, like, he wasn't the mayor of the town, because for some reason I guess they don't really have a mayor or mention the mayor, but, like, I guess since he was the town politician, I suppose is what we could call him, like, it makes sense. You know, someone who's, like, such a stickler for all of the rules and regulations and bylaws is never gonna be the most sympathetic character.
Sure. Yeah.
But you know, him and Luke, those shenanigans.
Well, I know.
You needed Taylor Dosey for that.
Yeah. They are funny. Like, they're funny together whenever they're going at it. I'm like, yeah, this is this works. It's really funny.
Yeah. And, like, the actor is really good in that role.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, he is. And that's another case. All the side characters are so perfectly casted because, like, they just are that, like, so well. And I'm always like, oh my god, yeah, I totally buy this. We haven't talked about any of, like, the, like, Suki or Jackson yet, or Michelle.
Yes. Yeah.
Melissa McCarthy, I think, is, like, perfect as Suki. I love her in the show. Yeah.
Yeah,
she's great.
I remember, like, seeing, when I saw it on TV, it was just so weird, because I think it was, like, almost around the same time where she was, like, in every big movie ever.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, that is a weird place to start, but no, she's so good. And I like that, like, in the pilot they made her, like, she continued to be, like, clumsy and klutzy, but, like, in the pilot it was almost like a circus clown level of oh, I burnt myself here, and this started a fire there, and this is boiling over, and I broke my leg. Like, I'm glad that they toned that down and made her just more of, like, a good friend and, like, normal person. And, like, eventually, like, she became a mother, but it wasn't, like, as sad. Like, it made more sense than Lane and her storyline.
Yeah.
Like, so that was, and, like, then having her as a mother trying to find time to, like, hang out and go out with Lorelai, like, that was a very, like, human, relatable, normal plot point. So, like, I like that they didn't make her this crazy character or completely write her out or make something super unbelievable out of her motherhood or lack of motherhood or wherever she was in her journey.
Yeah, it feels like a natural progression. Like, and I think you see that a lot of the time, like, in pilot episodes, especially with side characters, is they are just kind of like caricatures because no one knows what it's going to be yet. You don't know who's going to be playing it, but I think they do a good job of, as the show goes on, like, writing for Melissa McCarthy and, like, what her strengths are. And I totally buy, like, her friendship with Lorelai. I buy her relationship with Jackson. Like, them wanting to have kids and then how that all happens. It like it makes sense to me. And it's always satisfying, like when they're on screen. I'm always happy to see them on screen. And I know we haven't talked about the revival yet, but like she isn't in the revival for the first 3 episodes, and I remember the first time watching it being like, oh no, like maybe she was too famous, and then she comes back in like one scene at the end, and I was like, oh yay, like that was so, it made me so happy. I was like, oh, that's such a perfect use of her. Like,
yeah, but like if she wasn't in it, that would be so tragic.
Yes, exactly.
So sad. Also, I recently rewatched a storyline between her and Jackson, where Jackson finds out that a couple of his workers planted a bunch of weed, like somewhere in his plot, because like he's a farmer, gardener, whatever, and supplies vegetables around. And so it's like when they have children already, so like it's in like season 6, I think. Sure, or maybe 7, and so he just like, it was just so absurd. Like I think they truly ran out of stuff to write about, but it was so funny because he's like, yeah, I was walking through like the back part where I normally don't plant anything, and I found all of this weed and I don't know what to do with it, and they like hid it in garbage bags in the house. There was like 10 of them. Oh my and they like God. Wanted to throw it away, and they it was like stinking up everything. And yeah, just it definitely got absurd towards the end, but it was funny. Yeah. Like it was it didn't really like seem like it fit the tone of the show. Right. It was hilarious. And also the fact that, I don't know, these adults first of all didn't want to like keep any and like try it out. True. Unbelievable. But then just like, I don't know, I guess like at Connecticut it probably wasn't legal at the time, but I don't know, they just like were freaking out as if they were going to go to jail for like 100 years. These like 2 white parents who accidentally found weed in a garden. I don't know, it was so funny. Yeah, a lot of the last little bit feels like that. That's such a good plot line to talk about, like the end of the show, which I guess feels like that. Yeah, I guess we can like kind of get into it because I think we've pretty much hit on all the main characters, right? But we haven't talked about Paris. Oh my God, she's so good. Yes, we have to talk about Paris. Paris is great, like so good. Her in the revival is my favorite. Yeah. Just like the boss bitch she turns into makes so much sense, and I love it so much. She's just the perfect, like, I guess, first enemy and then frenemy of Rory at school. Sure. And I like that they ended up making them friends. Apparently, Liza Weil initially auditioned for the part of Rory, and obviously she didn't get it. But like Amy liked her so much that she wrote the role of Paris specifically for Liza. Yeah. Which is great. I'm so glad they found a way to keep her in because she's such a like brilliant actress, and even though obviously the character of Paris is sometimes infuriating and insane and anal and all of the things and like tyrannical over the newspaper in this like fucking bunker that she made in the office with her own little stove inside, like that also was kind of bordering on ridiculousness, but like she was still so lovable throughout all of it. I love Paris. Yeah, Paris is great. She is another character that like is who she is from the get-go and like continues to be that, and even when she has like changes within that, like right now obviously like her and Rory becoming roommates is so funny because they end like her last season at high school with like them saying goodbye, and the fact that they were able to like bring her back to like just by happenstance be Rory's roommate is so funny. Also the method by which they do that is that she has like a personal guidance counselor in her life. Do you remember this guy? Yeah. Which is like, it's so funny, and but it also makes so much sense because Paris is that type of person who has like all this like aggression, but is also constantly like seeking answers or whatever. It's so funny. She has to like have a craft room. Yeah, she has to have a craft room. Her anger. Oh my God, she's so good, and she's such a great, like you said, she's such a great actor. Yeah. I have a fun fact about her that I can talk about later when I get into my big spiel of crazy shenanigans. But yeah, she's awesome. She's great in this. She's great in the revival. And also, as great as she is, it's a little bit frustrating sometimes to me because when she's acting opposite Rory, you know, there's a very clear difference there
because she is fucking acting and Rory kind of isn't sometimes. But I think, like, because of who their characters are, especially in high school, it works. Yeah. Like, in high school, I buy that because, again, Rory's in high school and she's, like, unsure of herself. But as Rory gets, like, older in college and, like, obviously, like, develops a relationship with Logan and starts to become more adventurous, it feels weird to me when, like, just as an actor, she can't, like, hold her own with Paris when clearly her character is supposed to be able to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, especially, like, because half the time, because they're such close friends, it is, like, Paris challenging her on, like, why she's acting sometimes the way she's acting or making the choices she's making. And to then have, I don't know, I guess a less experienced actor just try to, like, lean back on that, like, oh, but I am Rory. I'm cute and naive, so I'm just gonna talk and it'll be fine. It was sometimes, very interesting to watch. My one thing with Paris, though, is when she dated the professor was very weird.
Ooh, that was weird. I did not...
And then he died? Like, that was so weird.
It was, I didn't buy any of... That was the one thing that happened with her, and it happens, like, in season 4, and I was like, this is weird. Like, this is... This to... Like, that plot line to me felt like whoever took over the writer's room after ASP left, like, probably also pitched that plot line. Like, that's, like, that type of shenanigans where it's like, the show isn't about shenanigans. It's about, like, people and, like, actual interactions. So when something like that happens, it's always like, that's fucking weird. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like, there was a plot point when they were in high school where they had to, like, do a project and, like, make a product. And so they worked with, like, Rory's grandfather.
Richard. Yep.
And, like, Paris was, like, did admire him a lot. So, like, the fact that she was into older men wasn't that much of a stretch.
Sure, yeah.
But still very, bizarre to then have her be in an actual relationship with
that felt like, okay, now that we're in college, we don't really know what to do with Paris anymore, so... I don't know, let's do this. And it was kind of like, whatever. I'm glad that they just killed off the guy and it wasn't really addressed after.
And then she found Doyle.
Yes, which is a better pairing.
Yeah. And we're watching Buffy right now, or watching it for the first time, I guess. And the guy who plays Doyle is in that as, like, a kind of recurring background character. But funnily enough, just before recording this, I finished an episode where he, like, had his own arc and, like, okay, spoiler alert, and also, trigger warning, tried to kill himself. So, like, that was wild. Yeah. I was like, okay, now to talk about Fun Love and Doyle from the newspaper.
Yeah. I love Doyle. Like, I'm glad you brought him up. Doyle's a fun character. I enjoy him. Good actor, handles it all well, someone else we should probably bring up from Rory's Yale life is Marty. Marty, who gets Marco in high school, I guess, like, friend zoned. It was also, like, it was funny for me to watch, I guess, like, so far removed from high school now as an adult, and just to be like, just have a conversation and then move on with your life. I don't understand why it takes so long. Because there is that episode where Rory's talking and is like, it's so good to have a friend like Marty who's just a friend. And, like, it's so good to be in college and not have guys want to... And, like, he clearly is like, oh, shit. But it's like it should have been resolved there. And it kind of goes on a bit longer. And there's that, like, awkward date where they go out with Logan and he doesn't have money to pay. And, like, Logan wants to cover it or whatever. God, And, it's all, I like Marty. I like his friendship with Rory. I just wish... they had a conversation like two people that age would have.
I know, and I'm so surprised. I mean, I guess maybe not, but, like, I'm surprised if they didn't have that kind of dynamic in high school with anyone for her.
Yes.
Because I find that, like, obviously that happens. Like, there's always a guy who you think is just your friend who's secretly in love with you and thinks you love him back and just aren't showing it and you just need to talk about it. But in high school, you never will. Yeah. And, so I find it interesting that they chose to do that in college. But some people are late bloomers, I guess.
I guess. I don't know. I guess. Yeah, but you're right. It did clock me as, this feels like this should have happened in Chilton. I don't know why it's happening now. Because,
maybe they already had too many men in the mix in high school.
Sure.
And they're like, this is unbelievable. We need to wait.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, coming from
4 guys into Rory and
well, that's the thing too. Is like, how does she always have so many guys into her? Like, I'm like, oh my god, like you're such a wet blanket of a person. Like you make like outdated movie references, and you are like, you think that you are destined to be fucking Christiana Monpour, but you're just like an average kind of smart person. Like, why would anyone be this like infatuated with you? I don't understand. But
like there were no
whatever.
Popular girls for everyone to be in love with.
I guess. I don't know. It's funny, but yeah. I
oh, Marty.
Yeah, poor Marty. That's for sure.
He gets a nice new girlfriend in season 7. That's a fun plot twist.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Okay, well, good for him. I'm glad he gets to be happy. Yeah,
that's also where I'm at. And, like, it's another, like, very much shenanigan of only season 7, where she makes a new friend, and she has a boyfriend who she only refers to as boyfriend, and then you meet boyfriend, and boyfriend is Marty.
See, I hate that. I hate that the show turns into that when it was such a, like, just strong character thing. Like, it's so fucking annoying when that stuff happens.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Do we want to talk a little bit about Logan? Because I feel like we talked a lot about Dean and Jess, but just kind of referenced Logan. I'm just at the part where they start being together.
That's the best time.
Yeah. I think Logan gets progressively more shitty as the show goes on, but not in a way that like betrays his character. Like, I think it's always within his character, but I kind of feel like in season 5 when they first meet, he is like the perfect match for Rory, and then they were like, well, we need to like add something here. He can't be the perfect match because of where, and obviously when we talk about the revival, like where she wanted the show to end and how it was supposed to end.
Yeah.
There would need to be some conflict there, so they kind of like make him more of a jerk as his dad gets introduced into the picture, I think.
Yeah. Well, because I think like, obviously he was introduced to be Rory's way to like have some fun, because as you mentioned, she is a complete wet blanket, and she just needs to let loose for like a millisecond.
Yes.
And he is perfect for that. And I think I'm kind of surprised that because he was introduced as that kind of character, that he turned into like a serious thing for her.
Yeah.
Like, so serious that it ended in a proposal.
Right.
Because I imagine that, like, I don't know, you never think that this crazy, fun-loving guy who seems like he's just going to be, like, that kind of distraction, I guess, will then be, like, someone who will propose. I think that's, like, almost every girl's dream or, like, idea. Yeah. Like, you meet this bad boy and you're like, I'm going to change him and make him loyal to me. And that they wrote that to be what actually happens was always something that was a little weird to me. Although, like, I understand, like, Matt Zuckery is, like, a great actor and super charismatic and attractive, and they had good chemistry, so they were probably just like, well, we don't want to let him go, and how are we going to bring another man into the mix? But, that was always something that was a little like, interesting that this secret society man becomes
I know. It's odd.
End game.
Yeah. And like what you said, he for me is definitely, if I had to pick between the boyfriends, I prefer him the most on screen because he, I think, carries the chemistry between them. Like, obviously, it's funny to think about because I haven't really seen him, Logan, in a lot of stuff outside of Gilmore Girls. Like, if anything, I can't really think of something off the top of my head.
I think he's like in a doctor show right now.
Okay.
Or like just was in one or something. I don't know.
Well, it's just funny because Dean and Jess, at the time of being in this show, are both leave a little bit to be desired in terms of like performance wise, because I think it was like both of their first things.
Yeah, they're both pretty young.
Yeah, and obviously, like, Dean goes on to be a supernatural for, like, a million years. Like, very good career. Same with Jess, obviously. Like, Jess goes on, now he's in This Is Us, and, like, he's so great.
Good. I love Jack Pearson so much.
Yeah. No, he's a phenomenal actor. But it's just funny to me that, like, in the time of this show, Logan is the one that I feel like really does the best job of, like, emoting and actually, like, expressing some type of chemistry with Rory. Like, both Dean and Jess to me felt like, I never bought them as, like, loving each other. Like, it was always just kind of, like, them saying
funnily
words.
enough, like Jess and Rory, or like the actors, dated in real life.
Yeah.
Like during this, which never really computed to me.
I think I knew that, but also, yeah, it never really...
Like, it doesn't, like, you can hear that fact, but then you watch them. I mean, I guess, I don't know. Like, I'm not an actor, but, like, if I, as a normal human, was, like, dating a person, and then someone was like, okay, I'm gonna record you two now interacting as not you, go. Like, I think probably because it was their first roles, and they probably weren't that skilled in acting. Like, I understand why that probably was extra awkward, and why that probably is what we saw on screen. Like, I hope they had better chemistry off screen.
You'd hope. You'd really hope. Because, it's odd.
So, like, I guess I understand coming from that standpoint why on screen they looked extra awkward. But, yeah, that was definitely... They definitely had the best chemistry, Logan and Rory.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And also, I like... as a part of Rory's overall arc, again, like we talked about at the beginning of this, the idea that as much as as much as Lorelai has like rejected her parents and is raising Rory to be her own kid, Rory keeps making choices to bring her closer to her parents, like her grandparents' life. Like she goes to Yale. She ends up like being with this rich guy who's a part of like her grandparents' life. Like the whole thing, it's like it goes full circle, and it's that part of it I really, really like. It's interesting plot-wise.
I think it became like a little too like going to the grandparents' wishes when she did run away from school and like stop talking to her parents. Joining the DAR and stuff was like a lot.
I get so mad when I think about that plot, because
that like part of the season when they were separated was like not fun to watch. Like every time I get to that part of my rewatch, like it's not as bad as like a season 7 like feeling, but it's still like, ugh, I need to get through these episodes when like Rory's being a straight dumbass and like being a puppet of her grandmother, even though apparently she wanted to drop out of school to like do what she wanted to do, and this is clearly not what she wants to do. Yeah, it was a lot.
It's the most unbelievable part of the show to me, because as much as Rory like continues to be closer to her grandparents, I never get the sense that she is like, I would never ever think that she could be that distanced from Lorelai. Like, it just doesn't compute in my head, and especially over the whole thing happens because of that conversation with like Mitchum Huntsberger, right?
Yeah.
Where he's like, you need to be better if you want to be good at if you want to do this for a living. I'm pretty sure.
Criticism of a person in like their 3rd or 2nd year of university.
Sure. Listen, I went to school for electrical engineering. I graduated. I got a job. I realized I didn't know anything, and I spent the first year of my job basically being told this is all wrong. And guess what? I didn't like quit my life. Like,
steal a boat?
It's so. Yeah, or like that whole thing is just so silly to me. Like, I understand what they're trying to go for, but the execution of it feels like a different show. Like, I don't buy at all that that's what would happen with like the Rory and Lorelai that we know. It's cartoony. Like it feels cartoony.
Like, the only thing that's kind of redeeming, not the fact that they stopped talking, but I guess the fact that she reacted so harshly to that, is that I suppose growing up she did never have any criticism.
Yes.
Like, you'd think, I don't know, like, she lived in a small town, maybe there'd be bullies, doesn't really seem like it. Like, yeah, okay, maybe growing up her mom didn't have that much money, but like they're doing fine now, and now especially she has connections to these uber rich grandparents, so truly she never has to worry about anything for a single day in her life. Yeah. And like, yeah, her parents are divorced, but like they're still on good terms, and her dad isn't a total piece of shit, and like, I don't know, so it seems like she didn't really ever have anyone say anything that negative to her. So I think at least that I might be able to explain that part of it. But her not talking to Lorelai about it, and like having that, like, I think 6-month complete lack of communication didn't make sense. But her completely breaking down makes a little more sense.
Yeah,
still
I'm with you.
Really dramatic, but possibly kind of justified.
I like her not being able to take criticism.
Yeah.
It's exactly what you said, because she has been raised to think she's like a child prodigy. And even when she's had setbacks, like at Chilton or when she first goes to Yale, she always like overcomes them or whatever. Yeah. This is the first time she's really been told, well, maybe you're just not fucking, like, the second coming. You know what I mean? Maybe you are just, like, decent. Yeah. And you're not going to be the next great thing. Which I like.
It's the reality for most people also.
It's the reality for most people, one. Two, I think it lends well to what her arc was supposed to be, looking at, like, the revival.
Yeah.
And three, to your point, she hasn't had that before, and so I like her, like, recoiling from that really hard. But, like, like you're saying, the execution of it and how long it goes on for, like, that to me feels like an episode. Like, at the fucking... It's like at the end of...
like a two-parter.
Yes. Like, at the end of the episode before she gets that criticism, she spends, like, an episode, like, pulling back, trying to find herself, whatever... And then you get the resolution of it isn't it? It ends up being Jess who tells her, he's like, what the fuck are you doing with your life, right?
Oh,
like,
sweet baby Jess.
Which is a great Jess moment. But, yeah, it's a great Jess moment. It's one of my favorite Jess moments. But, again, an episode. It's like, it lasts an episode. At the end of the episode, Jess is there for some reason. She runs into Jess, and Jess is like, you need to stop. And then, like, she stops.
The thing is, it makes sense for him to be the one to tell her, too, because, like...
Yeah.
He, I guess, had a similar life path. I mean, his was, like, his whole life, and his was more justified to why he was, like, constantly recoiling and acting out.
Yeah.
For her 6 month acting out for literally no reason. It's fine. But, like, he gets her in that way, and, like, also, like, because of the relationship they had, knows who she is and, like, what she probably really wants and what she's really feeling and, like, why she reacted that way. He was almost like her therapist. It worked out really well. But yeah, I definitely did not need to be like a whole half a season, 6 months. Like, she could have, like, I don't know, gotten a tattoo. Like, why steal a boat and have to do community service? Like, she had a court date, like Rory Gilmore, like, because someone told her she wasn't good. That's wild.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it plays like it plays like they didn't know how to deal with the internal side of that conflict well enough. Yeah. And so they resorted to like we keep saying, like, shenanigans. It was like the only way they knew how to, like, show it was shenanigans, which is so weird to me because they do such a good job of, like, dealing with internal conflict throughout the series that the fact that they resorted to shenanigans for this is real weird. And also, like, kind of feels like a studio note. Like, it kind of feels like the studio was like, hey, like, her and her mom get along too much, so this season, like, you guys need to really put a wedge between them. Because that is, like, a studio note fucking thing that someone would say. And I can't think of any other reason why they would jump to that conclusion as a writer's room that's, like, proven themselves so well up until that point. So, yeah.
That is true.
Okay, so, overall, on the base show, I think we can agree seasons 1 to 5... quality content.
Yeah.
I would say like once Rory gets to Yale, there's a little bit of a dip, but
yeah, but it is like nice. Like her at first discovering the world and meeting the new characters is like good. I still like it.
Yes, and also it's however much of a dip that is offset by like Luke and Lorelai's relationship finally happening, which is like incredibly satisfying.
Yeah.
Season 6 and 7 feel like a different show that doesn't in any way feel like how ASP wants to handle the characters around the show. Mm-hmm. And I guess that's a perfect segue into the revival, which I don't think we've ever talked about, but ASP is on the record as saying it's okay. So for anyone who doesn't know, the show ends, I think, in 2007.
Yeah.
Show ends in 2007 after 7 seasons. It ends in a really shitty way. ASP leaves the show. It basically just ends with Rory graduating and then going to cover like Barack Obama's campaign as a reporter or whatever. And it's just kind of like a generic whatever ending. You don't get like real resolution between anyone or anything. No.
Well, because at the time they didn't know if they were coming back for next season. It was
that was 50-50. The other thing.
So yeah, it was like a 50-50. Make it like it could be an end, but it could be a continuation.
Yes.
Which I would not have want to have seen.
Yeah, for sure. And then it goes like radio silence, no more Gilmore Girls, and then I think it's 20 years later because I think 2017 is when the revival came out, right? Or am I off on that?
It came out in 2016. And
okay, so 19.
It was announced like at their 15-year anniversary.
Yeah, so the revival I believe, if I have my history right here, was Gilmore Girls was on Netflix, and like a new generation of people discovered it or whatever, and so they went to ASP and were like, hey, do you want to do like a revival? And she used the opportunity to her and her husband Daniel write and direct 4 episodes that essentially serve as what the ending of the show should have been, or what she had always wanted the ending of the show to be. I'm just going to go on the record and say I love this. I don't know if I love I don't know if it has to be 4 episodes. Maybe it could have been 2. But in terms of where we pick up finding all the characters, and then like where the show ends and how it ends, I am so happy with. And I think it like perfectly fulfills the arc that everything has been like set up since season 1.
Yeah, like it definitely had to happen.
Yes.
Like the fact that because from the get-go, she was even like saying specifically like there are like 3 words that I want to end the series. Yeah. She was teasing that from day 1. So then the fact that in season 7 just her and the network weren't able to come to an agreement, she got kicked off, like that for real fans of the show, like not casual watchers, like at the time I feel like probably a lot of people were, was really hard. So then when it did come back and everyone loved it, initially she was like, maybe I'll do a movie, but for a while like fans were asking like, are you gonna do anything, and she was refusing. And apparently then she was like, okay, she went to Netflix. Netflix didn't go to her. She was like, hey, I have an idea.
Oh, she went to Netflix. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, because it was after they did like a 15-year reunion panel at South by Southwest, I think.
Okay,
and even then people were like, are you gonna do a reunion? What's up? She's like, no, never, of course not. And then like a few months later, or like even like a month later or something, it was announced that the Netflix thing was happening. Yeah, I feel like a movie would have been interesting, because I guess it was the length of like was each season the length of a movie?
Each episode, you mean?
Yeah, or like, well, because
each season. Gotcha. I thought you meant season.
Fall.
Yeah. Gotcha. I don't remember if they were an hour or an hour and a half. They might have all been the length of a movie, but
yeah.
I kind of feel like a 2-hour movie would have probably had everything we needed to get the gist of what the ending of the show was supposed to be.
Because I think the fact that Netflix allowed her these like 4 longer pieces allowed her to write in some definitely unnecessary things. Like if I didn't see them, my life would have been the same. I would have liked it the same. Like I think there was a whole play about something that was completely unnecessary. Like it was fine, but like 100% wasn't needed. Yep. And I guess I haven't even given my opinion on the overall revival. I loved it also. Yeah. After it came out, I think I watched it like I finished watching the 4 episodes and then immediately rewatched the 4 episodes, and they made me feel just as good as the series did. And for me, it worked out in such a way that I finished watching the series and like caught up with the podcast Gilmore Guys right around the time that the reunion was announced and came out, and so it was just like perfect that I was fully immersed in this world, and then I could just immediately watch the revival, which was really nice. Right. And so yeah, I loved being back in the world. I loved how everything was tied up. I bawled my eyes out when Luke and Lorelai got married. Yeah. I cried so hard. But one thing that has gotten a lot of criticism, and I want to know if you agree with the criticism or agree with me and loved it, is like Logan and the whole secret society. What was it? Life and Death Brigade? Yeah,
the Life and Death Brigade.
Their whole across the universe type day evening with Rory.
Sure.
How do you feel about that? Because everyone hates it. I loved it.
I feel like in general the revival has like a weird, like people don't like it. They're like, you should have just left it, which doesn't make any sense to me. And I also like that. To me, here's what the revival is to me, right? It's the opportunity, one, to end the show and Emily, Lorelai, and Rory's arcs the way that was all supposed to end.
Yeah.
And 2, and then the other thing, and really what makes up the rest of the episodes, is kind of just a greatest hits album of let's take the time to revisit everyone since it happens to be later and make sure that everything is tied up in a neat bow, right? We get to see Dean, we get to see Jess. And if we're going to see Logan outside of them, like, having an affair or whatever, which also, like, makes sense, like, it makes sense as well, or I'm like, yeah, I totally see that. I was totally fine with it because, like, the Life or Death Brigade is a big part of Rory's character. Yeah. So to do that in the show and to do it a bit more stylistically, that was another thing people have had a problem with, is obviously since it was straight to Netflix, like, people could swear, and obviously, like, the style of it was a bit more expensive, I guess is the easiest, with the production design. I had no problem with it. Like, it fit to me for what this was. It's greatest hits, and then, by the way, this was the resolution of everything, and I think I love all of that. So,
and also, like, knowing ASP and, like, who she is and how she speaks, like, this is kind of probably the way the whole show would have been if a thing like Netflix existed, and she could have just wrote it for Netflix and she didn't have to 100%. Cater to like even all half of the things we mentioned, and we were like, yeah, it was probably a studio note. Like, if she didn't have those studio notes and the language restrictions and the budget restrictions that a big studio came with, especially in freaking 2000, like, that was such a weird time for TV. So, like, the fact that people didn't like it, like, is really interesting, because I feel like it was probably her at her most, like, genuine and her best, and, like, what she most envisioned the show and the world to be like.
Yeah, for sure.
But, yeah, no, I loved it, and I have probably watched it, like, 3 or 4 times, and it's great. Like, yeah, obviously, like, as with the show, there were some things where it was like, this is too whimsical, too many shenanigans, but, like, that's what the show is. You gotta love it for that.
Yeah, for sure. I love, like we mentioned before, but I like the idea that it's almost a meta joke that Melissa McCarthy isn't in it. And, like, for me, the whole time, I was like, I was buying into the joke of, oh no, like, I guess she was actually just too busy to be in this, and then for her to show up at the end, and it pays off. Like, that pays off so well to me. Like, that made me so happy. Yeah. And revisiting everyone, like I said, seeing Dean, seeing Jess, seeing them both be, like, mature actors now was, like, was great. It felt really nice to, like, get a moment with all of them, like, see where they ended up. Obviously, Luke and Lorelai getting married is, like, one of the most satisfying things ever. I love that. I thought the plot of Rory writing a book called The Gilmore Girls. I love this scene for a reason we'll get into later. I have, like, you know that meme of the guy with all the strings, like, connecting the dots? That's my head right now. Like, I don't know if you've seen throughout this episode, I've been taking notes because I don't want to forget anything I have to talk to you about, okay? But I love that scene because it is one of the dots that I'm going to be connecting. I don't, like, the plot is a little bit, I don't want to say cheesy, but it's kind of like, I don't know. I mean, I guess it makes sense, but also I feel like that's such a trope at this point. Like, a character writes the thing and names it after the thing that it is, and it's like, I get it, but it's kind of overplayed. Like, I don't know. It seems a little silly. If that was always her intention for how the show was going to end, like 20 years ago, I'll excuse, like, I'll forgive it a little bit because, okay, like, that trope maybe hadn't been used as much back then. Yeah. Now it seems kind of silly, but whatever. It's fine. And then the ending, like, people, I guess, were also not happy about the ending, but for me, it hits everything I want to see happen, right? We haven't touched on this, but Richard, the actor who played Richard, passed away, like, pretty soon before they were going to film this, which I can't even wrap my head around because, like, Emily's arc is so, like, tied into that with, like, him being gone that I don't even know what it would have looked like if he was alive or if he was, like, I don't know what that would have looked like, but also I'm so happy with the way Emily's arc ends. Yeah. Like, to see Emily, because basically the ending of the show is we get a moment with Emily where she becomes more like Lorelai and tells, like, all her friends to fuck off, which is, like, it is so satisfying. Yeah. But as she becomes more like Lorelai becomes more like her because Rory's pregnant and doesn't like know who the father is. Yeah. Which I cannot imagine that was an accident. Like, I have to believe that the ending of the show, and I know obviously, like, the 4 words or whatever, like, Rory was always going to get pregnant, but I have to imagine that Emily's arc was also always going to be, like, getting a little bit closer to who Lorelai is as Lorelai gets closer to who Emily is, because that's what seems to make the most sense. But yeah, it's the whole revival is fantastic. I don't understand why people have a problem with it. Like, it makes no sense to me.
The only complaints I really had about it was that in some ways she almost like played to, because there was so much time in between, and obviously she's just heard like critiques and comments and questions, and she almost like answered some of them too directly, like the fact that like Michelle was now gay all of a sudden seemed very much like playing to the times and the critiques, or like I think there was a scene where people like asked Taylor Dozy if he was gay in like a roundabout way, because obviously that's something the fans were asking all along, and so that was kind of like it was just too obvious, like the fact that you could tell that she heard it and was like, oh yeah, I guess I didn't consider, or like I don't know, at the time it wasn't allowed. So those were the only things that were kind of like, you did, like, you were kind of forced to do that. Or like Mr. Kim all of a sudden showed up because he somehow was unexplainably not in the rest of the series. But yeah, other than that, I liked it. And the ending, like, funnily enough, because in Gilmore Guys, which I was listening to like up until right before I watched the revival, they ask any guests they have what they think the final 4 words are. So it was like a big thing that I was forced to think about at the end of every episode of Gilmore Guys.
Right.
And like obviously a bunch of them guessed like it would be that Rory was pregnant, to like complete that full circle.
Yeah.
And I don't know, hearing it on the podcast and thinking that that could be it, I felt like I wouldn't like it. But then I watched it in the revival, and I was like, oh no, it makes sense.
Yeah. Like,
she just was able to, like, I don't know, to explain it so beautifully. Like, because obviously, I don't know, it's an artistic idea, but also an obvious idea to have the lives of these 3 women be full circle and so interconnected and have everyone kind of learn from each other and blah, blah, blah. Like, that's obvious, but also smart, and so obviously there's ways to portray that are too obvious or too smart, and I think that the way she did it was such a good mix of the two.
Yeah, it felt, I mean, like, to your point, like, it's funny because I think a lot of time when we talk about movies or TV, a lot of times people use the criticism that it feels too, like, typical or, like, predictable or whatever, and it's funny because that's not strictly a problem with the story as much as it is execution most of the time, right? Like, to a certain degree, like, story has to be structured generally in a certain way, and the idea of, like, coming full circle with, like, the ending and the beginning and all that kind of stuff should really, in a good story, like, pretty much always be the case, to some degree or another. But yeah, like you said, I think the way she goes about doing it doesn't make it feel predictable, but it makes it feel like, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like it has to be that way. Like, when I got to the ending of the show and that was the ending, I was like, yeah, this had to be the ending. Like, it couldn't have been the way, it was so, like, definitive, and, like, this is, everything has been building to this, and if it wasn't this, I would have been, like, unsatisfied. And it's that fine line that, I mean, we talked about it this whole episode, but I think, like, her strength as a writer is that there's so much stuff in the hands of other people that would feel too much to one side or the other. Like, a character would feel too much like a villain, whereas, like, with her, it's really fleshed out. And I think even with the overall, like, story of the characters, in the hands of another writer, it would have felt stupid or predictable, but the way she executes it, it feels, like, definitive and like a full story.
Yeah.
Because she's very, I mean, look, we don't have to tell you, like, she's very talented. She is running, like, one of the most successful shows on Amazon Prime right now, so but yeah, I also love the revival, and I think that, obviously there's some silly stuff in there, and to your point about, and I think this is the problem with any kind of revival you do, I don't know how you do a revival of the show and not incorporate valid criticisms of the original thing, because the problem is you only have, like, 2 stances you can take. One is you don't address it at all, in which case people are just going to make the same criticism.
True.
Right? Or you go the other way where you do address it, but then it's like, well, you're addressing it because it's been pointing out to you, but it's a fight. It's a lose-lose. And it happens in literally any type of revival that I've seen, but obviously handled by her. I thought it was fine. It didn't like overly bump me. I was like, yeah, okay, I feel like this had to happen, but whatever. Like, I'm happy we get to see, even with all that stuff, even with some of the silly shenanigans that happens, even with it maybe being a little bit too long, like the fact that we get Emily like rejecting all that shit, and we get Luke and Lorelai's marriage, and we get that final scene with Lorelai and Rory, like makes the whole thing worth it for me.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It was great. All right, you want to blow my mind now?
What's up? My God, just sit back and get a drink. Okay, folks, we got to talk about this.
Water.
Okay, very good. So, as everyone here knows, I am a huge Aaron Sorkin fan. Okay, Aaron Sorkin.
He said it.
He has written so many great things. Oscar award-winning screenwriter, Emmy-winning screenwriter. If you guys haven't seen Trial of the Chicago 7, just came out on Netflix.
So good.
I don't know. I don't know if we're gonna do an episode on it or not. Hopefully,
we probably will eventually.
Everyone watch it. It's so good, and no one's talking about it, and it pisses me off. But like, it's just another classic Sorkin. But the reason I bring him up, as I do every episode when I'm talking about writing, because I've probably learned the most about writing from him. There's a really weird connection between Aaron Sorkin fans, specifically West Wing fans, and fucking Gilmore Girls. And I discovered it because I kind of had the inverse relationship that you did to Gilmore, Carol, which is obviously we both saw it on TV, but me coming to watch it on Netflix was a direct result of I was deep diving in Aaron Sorkin, trying to just learn as much as I could, and I was watching The West Wing, and there's a podcast called The West Wing Weekly, and the hosts of that podcast, one of the two, Rishi, is a Gilmore Girls fan who was on the Gilmore Girls podcast
many times.
And he would bring up Gilmore Girls and Gilmore Girls references, and I was like, this is weird. And then I did research, and I realized this is like a thing. And then that was a big factor in me watching Gilmore for the first time. And so I want to just address that a little bit. I think the biggest thing that links Aaron Sorkin and ASP is like dialogue. Like they both are so like renowned for fast-paced, like witty, energetic dialogue. And I think when you watch episodes of West Wing or Gilmore, they both have that. I think also beyond that, they're both just really good writers. They're both really good structural writers in terms of like following through with a character arc. Which is why I think that these two shows with no subject matter that makes any like there's no discernible reason a person should be fans of both those shows. Yeah. But that's why there are so many fans of both those shows. It's just like the stylistic choices made by the writers involved. So just to get a little bit deeper into this, I was doing some research, and while Gilmore Girls was on TV, which was, like we said, 2000 to 2007, that was, I believe, West Wing was on TV at that time, but I think it was Sorkin's final 2 years of West Wing when it was on. And there was an article I read from like 2005 or 6 where like there was this rumor going around that Aaron Sorkin was like ghostwriting episodes of Gilmore Girls, like uncredited. And no, you can Google it, and there's an article where someone asked ASP like, does Sorkin have anything to do with the show? And that's where I saw her quote about like, look, like Lorelai Gilmore is me through and through. Sorkin has nothing to do with the show, but like if he ever wanted to be a part of the show, like absolutely he could totally write on the show. So it's kind of like, it was just fun to see her acknowledge him in that way, and also that this was like a rumor going on even in the early 2000s, like before I made this connection. Like clearly people were making this connection between their two styles of writing.
As if he would do it uncredited and she would let him. Like, they would have to...
Could you imagine?
Thing. That's so
Could you imagine? Like, how would that ever happen? How would he ever...
ASP has never written an episode. It's been Aaron Sorkin all along.
Yeah, it's been Aaron Sorkin all along. That would be so funny. You should look up the article. It's funny. Like, it's genuinely funny. Yeah, so that's that. But it gets... This is just the surface of the connections, okay? So, first of all, there are a lot of like cast connections and crew. Yeah. So Lauren Hisrick, I think is her name, who I believe, if I'm thinking of the right person, is now show running The Witcher for Netflix.
Okay.
I think that's her. She is a famous West Wing director, or it might not have been her actually. I don't know. Oh, you know who it was? I got it. It's Leslie Linka Glotter.
Yeah.
She directed yeah. She directed lots of episodes of West Wing. She's also directed lots of episodes of Gilmore Girls. So there's like weird crew cast over there. Cast-wise, Paris from Gilmore Girls is in an episode of The West Wing.
Oh.
And she is phenomenal in that episode. Like, totally different character from Paris. But it's just funny to see her, like, say Sorkin dialogue or whatever, like, in The West Wing. Because it still has that same, like, rhythmic quality to it. And I was like, oh, that's a funny connection that happened there.
Well, he knew she could do it.
Exactly. And I haven't actually taken the time to plot out. I think she was on West Wing before she was on Gilmore.
Well, then, because of her appearance on West Wing, ASP knew she could do it.
ASP knew she could do it.
One of them saw the work and was like, it works for me, we're the same.
So that was like, that's a funny thing that happened. Another funny like thing that's similar between them is that pretty famously, so there were 7 seasons of The West Wing. There's 7 seasons of Gilmore Girls. Sorkin left after season 4 of The West Wing because the studio like wanted to do stuff that he didn't want to do, long story short. And so he left, and his famous, like, he's a writer, and his famous directing partner, Tommy Shalami is his name. I'm not making that up. That's his name.
I know.
They both left the show together at the same time after season 4. Obviously, ASP and her literal partner, like her husband, Daniel, they leave the show together after season 6, so it's a slight difference. But, like, both these creators leave the show, and then the show ends in a way that, like, people don't necessarily find satisfying. So that's, like, a funny connection between the two of them as well. This is where things get weird, okay? Is that so ASP, like we talked about, gets point blank asked to her face about if Sorkin's writing on Gilmore. Says no, obviously not, whatever. In the revival, there's the scene where it turns out Rory is writing a book based on Gilmore Girls, and it's called The Gilmore Girls. And then the scene ends with Lorelai saying, "Drop the, it's cleaner." And she walks out, which is one of the most famous lines of dialogue from The Social Network, which was written by Aaron Sorkin, which, like, made my head explode. I was like, oh my god, she is referencing Aaron Sorkin. Like, and it's just, like, it's such a nod to the fact that, like, people think they're, like, connected somehow, where I was like, oh, I cannot believe that just happened. Like, blew my mind that happened. That's hilarious. Now, here is where we get crazy deep cuts, okay? This is the final one. And I need to give you some context here.
Okay.
So, Sorkin's career goes like this. He writes the play A Few Good Men, okay? It ends up on Broadway. Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
He then gets, the play gets bought by a studio or whatever to be turned into a movie. Rob Reiner directed that movie. He asked Sorkin, do you want to do the screenplay? Sorkin says, okay. He's never done a screenplay before. William Goldman, famous screenwriter, mentors him through that process. That's his first thing for the screen. Writes that, okay? Then he writes a couple of movies after that, also on contract by the studio's Castle Rock. That was a studio that made A Few Good Men. They say, okay, we want you to write 2 more movies for us. One is this movie where you're just going to basically be doing rewrites. It's called Malice, and which is I've never seen. It's the only thing in Sorkin's thing I've never seen, because apparently it's bad. And then he writes this movie called The American President, which is like a rom-com.
Oh.
It's weird. It's about a president whose wife has died, who then, like, starts dating.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Yes. It's like a rom-com. But in the process of writing that, he was doing a bunch of research about, like, the American politics or whatever. Yeah. And he had written, like, a 300-page draft of the screenplay. Which is, like, a screenplay is normally only like 120 pages. So he wrote like a 300-page thing, and they were like, okay, we need to cut out a lot of the shit. And most of what was cut out became the pilot episode of The West Wing.
Oh, very cool.
Yes. So this is where it gets crazy. So West Wing, so he turns that into the pilot script for The West Wing. It doesn't get picked up right away. People are like, we don't want to do this. So he's like, okay. So he makes this other show called Sports Night, which only had 2 seasons, which is about, like, the behind the scenes of a sports broadcast show, starring Felicity Huffman. Okay? So after season 1 of Sports Night, people are like, oh, this guy is good. So they take the pilot script of The West Wing and they turn The West Wing into a show. So now he's doing those 2 shows simultaneously. Sports Night ends. He keeps doing West Wing. He leaves West Wing after season 4. Okay? Then I think most people have this mental idea that he leaves West Wing after season 4 And that's when he goes on to do movies. And that's when he makes Social Network, Moneyball, Steve Jobs, Molly's Game, whatever. He comes back briefly for TV to do The Newsroom, which critically was like people didn't really like it. So I think people think like after West Wing he just became a movie guy. This is where fun stuff happens, okay? There's a show that only lasted one season that he show ran, and it was written by him, and Tommy Schlamme was the main director on the show.
Okay.
And it's called Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip.
Oh.
Okay? One season. No one has ever fucking heard of the show, and of course I've watched the season. Okay? And it takes place prior to Sorkin becoming a movie screenwriter, again, with like Social Network, but after his firing from West Wing. It takes place in 2006, which is right at the tail end of Gilmore Girls.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about this. It had to stop because 30 Rock was more popular.
Yes. So, but here's what the show's about, okay? The show is about the behind the scenes of... It's SNL. It's not actually SNL. It's like generic sketch show, but it's literally SNL. And here's where, like, my mind blows, okay? Is that the show is about a writer and a director. The writer is played by Chandler from Friends. Yeah. The director is played by... Yeah. The director is played by Bradley Whitford from West Wing. Okay? Yeah. So... And they're clearly supposed to be Sorkin and Schlamme. Like, to a point where it's like... There is dialogue, like, in the pilot episode where they're trying to bring him on... They're trying to bring them on to showrun this SNL show. And he's like, well, the last time I did a show, like, you guys kicked me off and you didn't like my ideas. And I was like... Oh no, I can't believe this is... I cannot believe you wrote a show just to bitch about what happened on West Wing. And then also, Sarah Paulson's in this show. And she plays like this cast member who's also like super Catholic or whatever. And her and Matthew Perry's character, who's supposed to be Sorkin, have a relationship. Which, at the time, Aaron Sorkin was in a relationship with Kristen Chenoweth. Who is also like a super like Christian. Yeah. Yes. Okay. So that's this show. This show is this very personal thing that exists. Yeah.
I can't believe he wrote that and wanted it on TV.
Yes. Okay. Now, in the show, because it's like an SNL type thing, there are celebrity guests. Who play themselves. Yeah. So in the pilot episode, Felicity Huffman shows up and she's playing herself. She's playing Felicity Huffman, hosting the show. But Felicity Huffman was in Sports Night, so, like, that's weird, because that's a Sorkin-written show. Okay, later in the show, Allison Janney shows up, and she's playing Allison Janney,
oh my God.
He just was in West Wing. Actors. But here is the thing, though, is that, like, Bradley Whitford and there's a bunch of other people who were on West Wing who play fictional characters in the show.
That's weird.
But Allison Janney is playing Allison Janney, who was also an actress in West Wing in the show.
Do they mention West Wing?
No.
Like, okay.
No. I think they mention, like, a political show, maybe, if I remember correctly. But no, they don't mention West Wing, okay? Okay. Lauren Graham plays herself as a celebrity guest in an episode of this show, okay? I know. And I don't know how to handle that information. I don't know what to do with that because it is this cycle of like people thinking they were working together when their shows were originally on the air. Yeah. And then Sorkin writes for Lauren Graham and puts dialogue in her mouth that like basically sounds like ASP dialogue because they write similarly. But she, at the time, would be, like, fictionally on the show because of Gilmore Girls, which means Gilmore Girls, the show, takes place in this universe. Yeah. And then, like, ASP, obviously, like, in the revival, referencing Social Network. So, it doesn't make sense, like, in continuity of, like, the universe that we're building, that Gilmore Girls happened. Lauren Graham hosts this show that Sorkin wrote, like, because of it, but then Gilmore Girls later goes on to reference Sorkin's work. So it's like, it is all levels of just fucked up in them referencing. But also in the show,
Sorkin himself wasn't in it. He just wrote it and had a Aaron Sorkin type character in it.
Yeah, I mean, literally, it's just him, but yes. Yeah.
Oh my God. I kind of love their dynamic. I love that they just keep doing this.
Me too. It's so much fun. I love it. I love all of it.
I hope they do this forever. Like, I never want them to actually collaborate on anything. Yeah. I just want them to always kind of be running parallel to each other and, like, winking at us and winking at each other. I hope they never have an in-person conversation.
I know. It's so funny to me. Like, just the layers deep of, like, references.
Yeah. No,
I love it.
Yeah, they talked about Lauren Graham being on Studio 60 in Gilmore Guys, which...
Did they really?
Yeah. Oh, when I eventually... Because I promise, I swear to God, I will eventually watch The West Wing. It's on... And funnily enough, also reverse to you, we always do this with our lives. I wanted to watch West Wing because of Gilmore Guys and Rishi coming on and talking about The West Wing. And also, like, one of the hosts of Gilmore Guys is also, like, an Aaron Sorkin fanatic. Like, he's one of those people who, like... is obsessed with Aaron Sorkin and ASP because they're so similar, and like he is very much into that whole crossover. So he also just in every other episode of Gilmore Girls would mention Aaron Sorkin and The West Wing, and so I was like, okay, I gotta watch The West Wing, but I couldn't find it anywhere. Now you hooked me up.
I hooked you up.
When I finish Buffy, I will watch it and then listen to West Wing Weekly.
It is mind blowing.
I know, I'm so excited. And they recently, I'll get to it eventually, but I guess they did like an election special reunion thing that I found on Crave, so I can also watch that after.
They took one of the episodes of the show and just basically turned it into like a stage play.
Oh. Cool.
And they had to recast because like the guy who plays the chief of staff in the show, Leo McGarry, the actor John Spencer, like passed away during the show's runtime. So they actually brought in Sterling K. Brown to...
Oh, wow.
Play that character, which is interesting because he was like a white guy that now gets played by a black guy, which is cool because it like adds a new dynamic because there's certain like dialogue changes they made where it's like, oh, that's cool, that's like a different dynamic. Also, Sterling K. Brown is on This Is Us. You know who else is on This Is Us?
Milo Ventimiglia.
Oh my god, it's all connected. I can't. I fucking can't with this.
You know what? You know how Gilmore Girls came full circle? This podcast also just went full circle. Look at us doing the damn thing. We're so good. Oh, This Is Us is a good show, but we're not going to talk about that today. We're already at over 2 hours.
Oh my god.
Which I mean, we expected. Like we could have. We haven't even probably talked about half of the plot. We didn't even say what team we're on, Marco.
Okay, what team are you on?
I'm on Team Jess. You can't say Team Nobody. Of course it's Team Nobody. They're all trash. You have to pick one.
Then Team Logan.
Okay.
They have chemistry. They get along with each other, and they're generally on the same page about things, and it's not, at least from what I've seen so far on this rewatch, overly abusive one way or the other. So...
True. Yeah, I feel like in all cases there's always like one thing that like is kind of unforgivable, but you have to like overlook it. Like when he like cheats on her, like although they were on a break, I am a very firm believer of like if you're on a break and you're like not seeing each other and you want to sleep with someone, like fine. But like I get it, that wasn't communicated, and then he didn't tell her about it after. That's kind of shitty. And then like Jess, the whole like trying to push her to sleep with him, but like you know they all grow, and like that sucks and it's unforgivable, but it's a show and you have to overlook it to pick a favorite, and I picked Jess because I think his growth was good. And I mean, looking at if he didn't come back ever, obviously he's shitty, and I probably would have picked Logan. Yeah. But he came back and was great, and now I love him.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah. So at least we addressed that. Can you imagine if we ended this episode and never talked about it? We kept saying we were going to and didn't.
We did. We finally talked about it. No one is Team Dean because Dean is not a character. He's just written to be whatever he needs to be from season.
He's kind of like a golden retriever.
Yes.
Like that's the only vibe I get. Not like a human man, just a little puppy.
Yeah, he's just a little puppy. I get
Which is fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we did it. We could talk forever, but we shouldn't. For the people's sake.
For the people, yeah.
Also, I guess for our sake. Eventually, we will have to go to sleep and stuff.
True, yeah.
But, yeah, we don't know what we're talking about next week. So that's going to be... Or next week. Next episode, which will be who knows when and about who knows what. So that's a fun surprise.
Yeah, I think most likely probably just you and Dan, because I got a lot of work stuff coming up, so
Yeah.
we'll see what happens with that. So you guys may all have to go without me explaining intricacies about Aaron Sorkin's work and life history and how it relates to other stuff. So good luck with that.
Maybe we'll have an episode without Aaron Sorkin mentioned.
I hope one of you guys brings him up. Like, I hope one of you guys has to bring him up for some
There'll
reason.
be like an unavoidable point that's just so obvious.
Yeah, exactly.
Honestly, it could happen.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
But yeah, so I think we're going to call it a day. You said everything you wanted to say?
I did. I think I did.
All right, me too. So thanks for listening for a very long time, especially this week. As always, much appreciated. Hope you enjoy. Let us know if you have any questions, comments, or concerns.
All right, folks, you're all the best for listening, as per usual. And if you have any questions about how people's life work relates to each other, I'm always happy to answer. By the way, for some reason I noticed, this is a bad time to mention it, our last episode on Friday the 13th, like, it didn't show up in my subscription feed, so I actually had to go look for it.
Huh.
So I'm pretty sure, like, it just didn't show up in people's subscription feeds for some reason.
Okay.
So if you missed that, we also did that episode. Go watch that. I have 28 Friday the 13th discs. If anyone wants one, please hit me up. I can't with this anymore, so.
Marco's final plea. Oh my God.
Plea.
Well, thanks, guys. Take one of Marco's DVDs.
Please.
Catch you on the flip side.